of Union, New Jersey at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, February 17, 2015, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street in Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business that may properly come before the board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Friday, February 13, 2015, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star-Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, Alternative Press, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of the meeting. Dana, could you do a roll call, please?
Rich Matesic.
Here.
Lucy Biegler.
Here.
Mark Friedman. Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Chris Leinhardt.
Here.
Jimmy Lights.
Here.
Gretchen Olig.
Here.
Peggy Astor.
Here.
Mitch Slater.
Here.
All right, Brendan, could you lead us in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, announcements. Peggy, anything down your end?
Yes, I have two announcements. One from Edison. Edison Intermediate School invites all parents and the public to Raising a Beautiful Girl, an empowering approach to connecting your girl in specific ways to help elevate her self-esteem. The informative program will be held Wednesday, February 25th at 7 p.m. in the Edison Intermediate School Auditorium. I also have an announcement from Roosevelt. Roosevelt Intermediate School in Westfield recently hosted a similar presentation for parents entitled Raising Resilient Girls. Close to 200 parents attended the evening presentation on January 28th, which featured guest speakers Simone Marion, Executive Director and co-founder of Girls Leadership Institute, GLI. Ms. Marion shared with parents and teachers ways to help girls practice assertive self-expression, emotional intelligence, and healthy relationships, preparing them for a life of personal and societal leadership. The presentation marked the second Coffee with Counselors event organized by Roosevelt's Intermediate School counselors Christine Trottier, Kim Schumacher, and Stephanie Thompson. They will hold a third Coffee with Counselors event at a morning session in the spring.
Thank you.
Okay, and another announcement from Roosevelt and the Intermediate School. 8th graders Matt Leone and Brandon Hipp from Roosevelt Intermediate School were awarded first place in Robocross at the Science Olympiad Regional Competition held at the New Jersey Institute of Technology on January 15th. They have advanced to compete their robot in the state tournament March 10th through March 12th at Middlesex County College. Science teacher Jeffrey Robbins explained that all of our Science Olympiad students did great, placing 6th out of 20 teams. They medaled in 6 of the 21 events, and in addition to a first place medal in Robocross, placed 3rd in Green Generation, 4th in Dynamic Planet, and 5th in Elastic Launch Glider, Art Trajectory, and Picture This. In 3 of the other events, the students also placed in the top 10. Congratulations.
I have another announcement, this time at Roosevelt. Roosevelt Intermediate School held its annual Black History Month celebration last week with special guest speaker Sarah Collins Rudolph, whose sister Addie Mae was killed at a Birmingham, Alabama church bombing in 1963. Rudolph was severely injured, traumatized, and disfigured. In addition to the life-changing story told by Rudolph, guests of Roosevelt included the Newark Boys Chorus. Roosevelt's Sharps and Flats participated in 2 of the songs. Computer teacher Pam Friedman and Roosevelt principal Stuart Carey continue to organize these school-wide annual assemblies, which Mr. Carey describes as inspiring for both students and adults.
Thank you. Anything on your end?
Yes. Westfield High School's Model UN delegation of 173 students won the Outstanding Delegation Award at the YMCA Model United Nations Conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania on January 9th through 11th. This award recognizes success in the conference as a whole, from preparation to debates. The Curtis Meyer Award for Student Leadership, presented to one youth secretariat who demonstrates significant leadership, was won by Andrew Zale. For a complete list of awards, please check the district and high school news websites. Congratulations to all the students and their advisors, David Delafera and Danielle Faribaugh.
Okay.
Thank you. Mitch.
Lori, thank you for this one. Westfield High School student-run newspaper, High's Eye, now in its 81st year and one of the only weekly independent high school news programs in the country, was recognized by both the Columbia Scholastic Press Association and the National Scholastic Press Association. The Columbia Scholastic Press Association awarded High's Eye a silver medal in hybrid print and digital critique, recognizing both the online and print versions. High's Eye was awarded a second-class honor rating by the National Scholastic Press Association based on critique of the digital version. In two categories, site design and writing and editing, High's Eye earned a perfect score. Congratulations to the students, even one that I happen to have at home, and advisors Nicole Shimoni, Rosemary DiBattista, and Warren Hines. And if you've never had a chance to check the High's Eye out, go check them out on their website. It really is top-line journalism. Really proud of what they're doing. Thanks.
Thank you. Ginny.
From the elementary schools, congratulations to the McKinley Elementary School community who donated 1,649 canned goods and non-perishable items to the needy as a result of its Super Bowl program organized by the PTO. The goal of 1,000 items was exceeded, and the act of helping others was acknowledged by Principal Mark Buno. Congratulations to McKinley. And these are congratulations to our athletes. Congratulations to the boys swim team, who on Thursday beat Hillsborough to win the NJSIAA sectional championship. The team also previously captured the Union County championship, and I guess now it's on to states. So we look forward to hearing how the boys swim team will do there. And congratulations to Mallory Weiss, a senior at Westfield High School, who has been named as one of 2 goalies on the U.S. lacrosse women's team. She is one of only 18 players across the country to fill the 2015 U.S. Women's National Under-19 team, which will defend its gold medal at the Federation of International Lacrosse this summer in Edinburgh, Scotland. We have wonderful student athletes, academic athletes, and we are so proud of them. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you.
I have an announcement from the high school. Westfield High School has been notified that 8 students have achieved perfect scores in November and December on the SAT and ACT standardized test widely used for college admission criteria. This brings the total of perfect scores so far this year to 24. The November SAT high scores included Daniel Mitchell for math, Soo-Min Chung for Korean with listening, and Jian Hung Lu for Chinese with listening. For the December SAT, Jake Barrow for Math 2 and Julia Simpson for writing. And for the December ACT, Jordan Hindes for reading, Sarah Steiner for reading, and Diana Wu for science. So congratulations to those students.
And for the next announcement, we actually have some guests with us tonight. We're very fortunate in Westfield that we have the Westfield Ed Fund, who works in partnership with the schools and helps our teachers, provides grants for some of the initiatives we're working on in the district, and it is comprised of community members who year after year tirelessly work to raise money so that teachers can be given grants to support their work in the schools. So I think we have a team coming up, and I think I'll introduce Claudia Andreski first, but I'm not sure quite the order they're going in. The Westfield Ed Fund team, here we are.
Thank you so much for your time. We wanted to start off with thanking everyone who contributes to the Education Fund of Westfield. We were able to give out 7 grants this fall period, and some of them are so amazing that I think we need these things. So here we go. Westfield High School, we gave to the Fed Challenge, where students at the high school are competing with other districts regarding, my favorite, analyzing economic conditions and recommending a course for monetary policy. We could use that. And then Franklin School, we gave all the second grades flash masters so that they could memorize their times tables, including addition and subtraction, because we realized that, you know, the flashcards, they're not as much fun as flash masters. And then we gave the styrofoam cutter to Roosevelt Intermediate School, and Digital Learning Center at the high school. With Mr. Peasy, we gave 2 iMac computers to bridge the gap with teachers and their peers regarding technology and education and how to improve that. And then we worked together. This was my favorite only because we were working very hard to work together with the PTOs from each of the schools. So at Jefferson School, we were able to buy computers for the library where the PTO donated some of the funds and we donated some of the funds. And we're trying to do more and more of that. We think that's really important. And we also have great respect for the robotics club, and it's going to be expanding, and we were able to fund some of that, and also the STEM initiative for the whole district. So onward and upward, and we hope you continue to contribute to the education fund. Amy.
So, we invite you to Rock for Schools. This Saturday at Crossroads, we're holding a fundraiser. 3 bands from town who are really fun have donated their time and talents. We'll be performing between 8 and 11 with a silent auction and a 50-50, and it's only $15, so we hope you and your friends will join us. Thanks.
I'm going.
So then you have to come. And also, these went home today. This is our annual newsletter that went out, and it just highlights the wonderful family science night we had. It was such a success that it's going to become an annual event. And of course, Rock for Schools. And then if you want to read more about the grants, it's on the back. So we do put those out, and it went to all the elementary school students today, and then they'll be in the higher schools. So
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yes,
all you
thank you
do.
for that. And Rock for Schools is quite fun, so I would encourage people to go. It's a great night.
And it's inside.
Yes, it's inside.
Thank you. All right, the next Board of Education meeting, the board has scheduled a workshop on March 3rd and a regular Board of Ed meeting on March 17th. On March 17th, there will be a budget presentation, and we anticipate approving the tentative budget for the 2015-2016 school year at that time. With that, I would recognize the public for agenda items only. All right, we'll then go to the superintendent's report. Dr. Dolan?
Yes, you know, as I think about it, often we end up talking about our older students more than we do our younger students. And we like our older students as well, but tonight we get to focus just a little bit on our youngest students. Our youngest students attend Lincoln School, and for the past few years we've had a kindergarten wrap program to be in partnership with our kindergarten half-day program. And so today we're asking Mrs. Audrey Zavitz, who's the principal of Lincoln School, to give us an update and let us know about how the kindergarten wrap program is progressing at Lincoln School. Mrs. Zavitz.
it's absolutely my favorite subject to talk about. Good evening. I'm excited to be here tonight to talk about our Lincoln School wrap program. As you know, we doubled the wrap from 2 sections to 4 sections this year. We are currently running 2 morning sections for students in PM kindergarten and 2 afternoon sections for students in AM kindergarten for a total of 80 students. Our 2 wrap coordinators are Mrs. Michelle Rickles, who happens to be here, Mrs. Rickles, and Mrs. Tricia Miller, and we are very lucky to have them. The goal of our program is to provide interdisciplinary activities that enrich and support what students are learning in kindergarten. Now, some of these activities include reading a story and then working on small group and whole group activities that center around it. For example, one class read The Mitten by Jan Brett. Students then painted a paper mitten and weaved it together using colorful yarn. Then the story was read again, and students reenacted it using the mittens they had created. Carving a pumpkin and counting the seeds. The dried pumpkin seeds were used to make beautiful pumpkin designs, which decorated our hallways in October. taking a nature walk and collecting leaves, and then counting and categorizing the leaves by color, shape, and size. Students also created leaf rubbings from the leaves they collected. Apple Week was celebrated in September. Students used fresh apples to design apple prints. Paper apple mosaics were made and a class graph was created of favorite apples. Any idea which apple won out? Red apples. While in RAP, students enjoy a small parent-provided snack each day. They eat lunch in our gym, and when the weather is cooperative, students go outside for a short recess period. When the weather does not cooperate, you can read that the winter of 2015, students watch part of a movie or play an indoor game. Prior to eating lunch, each student is provided with a hand wipe. Now, as you can imagine, we have enjoyed a spirited interest in the RAP for 2015-2016, and Dr. Dolan and I have been meeting about this, and as a result, the size of each RAP class will increase by 2 students, and the number of RAPs will increase by 2 sections. This means that next year, each of our 6 sections will have 22 students for a grand total of 132 students, which is 52 more than we have this year. The RAP lottery was held on February 12th, and as a result of the larger number of available spots, only 36 families had to be offered the wait list. This also means that the number of kindergartners at Lincoln School has increased as well. The first year we held the RAP, we had 142 kindergartners registered, and while we are still registering students, we had 2 come in today, we currently have 205. Now, historically, families come in to register throughout the summer, so that number is likely to rise. I think a testament to the success of our RAP program is that a number of neighboring districts have contacted me this year to find out what makes our RAP so successful. They've expressed interest in creating a RAP of their own, so I have fielded many phone calls from private schools in Westfield asking about our curriculum, the cost, and the kinds of enrichment we provide. However, most important are the opinions of our kindergartners. So in an effort to give you a sense of how they feel about the RAP, we asked them to complete the sentence, what I like best about the RAP is, and here are some of their uncensored answers. Making and reading books, coloring and playing with friends, center time and projects at the writing table, Hot Wheels Friday, magnetic tiles and free choice time, learning about dinosaurs, my job and glue. Sounds good, right? But my personal favorite, everything. In closing, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you, the members of the Westfield Board of Education, and Dr. Dolan, our second-to-none superintendent, for your support of and encouragement for the Lincoln School RAP program and for allowing us to once again double in size. We at Lincoln School are so very proud of this program, and we look forward to its continued success and growth. Any questions?
Just want to comment, thanks to you as a successful principal and your teachers there, because it's true, the kids are speaking in volumes of the program by increasing because of you and the teachers.
Thank you. Thank you.
So thank you.
So I thought it was interesting, your comment that kindergarten, enrollment is up. You commented that enrollment was up, but was that because we're taking from other programs, or it didn't, I wasn't quite sure.
Well, the way that I look at it is when we started the RAP program, we had a set number of children that we had had for the 5 years previous, give or take, whatever the enrollment was. But once we were able to offer the RAP program, I have to be honest, the first year I really think it was, let's see how this thing goes. And by the second year, which is now this current year, that we doubled. And then next year we're doubling again. So I think the way that I look at it is that the number of parents who want to send their children to Lincoln has grown exponentially to the number of RAPs that we've had.
Terrific.
Yes.
Jane?
Audrey, It's a great program, thank you. We started out when Lincoln was built with 240 students. We had 7 sections,
We did.
morning and afternoon.
We did.
Right? And then we dropped down a bit, and we were able to use extra rooms, available rooms for these wraps. So next year, you'll have 3 rooms using wraps.
Yes.
Are you at max again?
We're close. The difference too between what we're looking at this year and next year and say our first couple of years is our class sizes were a lot smaller at that time. You know, we're now at an average of 21 to 22 students in a kindergarten class. So not only have our classes gotten bigger, but we've enlarged now the number of wraps. So we really actually have technically one more room. One room is being used in AM, another in a PM for 2 different programs that I can't combine. So there is more space.
So
I don't know that I'll
it's-
be here saying this next year, but there is more space right now.
So if your capacity were going to expand through the summer, you have a little bit of room.
Oh, yes, we do. Absolutely, we do.
grow.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We thought about that too, because it's
Of
important.
course.
And I know one of the things that I found interesting, we did the wrap last week, and we expected, once the wrap went out, that some of the people that did not get into the wrap to say, we don't want to go to Lincoln. And that hasn't been the case. Now, of course, they might be waiting, but at this point, we've held on to a large number of those children. And we also had 2 children who the parents sent me this weekend an email that said, we will no longer be taking part in the wrap. And I said, thank you very much for the email. Will you still be sending your child to Lincoln? And I get back, absolutely. So they've made other arrangements, whatever that means, but they still are coming to Lincoln. So I really think, I do believe that this program has made us a very important part of not only the district, but the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything else? All right. I would ask the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on January 20, 2015, February 3rd, 2015, and the private minutes of February 3rd, 2015. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions on those minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Dana, I have to abstain from the public minutes from February 3rd. Okay.
Actually, I do as well.
All right. I'd ask the board to consider personnel motions 1 through 21, noting that 21 was at the table this evening. Have a second? Ginny, thank you. Do you want to speak to a few of these?
Yes, the first item under personnel includes 4 retirements. So tonight I'm announcing with regret the retirement of these 4 staff members whose service to Westfield students totals more than 107 years. For more than a decade, Catherine Hinman, or Ann as she is known, has been a caring paraprofessional at Washington School. She has worked with students who have a variety of learning needs in all grades and in partnership with many of Washington's teachers. She helps out during the lunch hour and can always be counted on to go above and beyond. The first staff member whom visitors to Edison Intermediate School usually see is Doris Greslak. As a secretary in the main office, she cheerfully answers questions, handles student attendance, and is understanding presence for parents, staff, and students. For 25 years, Doris has worked in the library and the main office where she knows everyone's name and is always gracious and accommodating. Brenda Benameo has been a deeply valued staff member for 31 years. Brenda began her career in Westfield as a physical education and health teacher at Westfield High School, where her sense of fairness and wonderful humorous outlook on life made her stand out. In 1984, she became one of Roosevelt's guidance counselors, and for the next 22 years was an exemplary counselor, caring deeply about her students and being a great resource on adolescent development for both staff and the administration. But 8 years ago, Brenda became one of the district's social workers, carrying her empathy and understanding of students to another level as a member and leader of a child study team. And finally, for over 40 years, George Kapner has been a key member of the math department at Westfield High School, teaching a variety of subjects and providing extra help to students grappling with the concepts in algebra. He has served as a leader on many building committees and has extended his commitment to Westfield High School students beyond the framework of the school day. An acclaimed coach at both the state and national levels, George has coached girls and boys soccer and boys tennis, garnering a number of state championships throughout the years. He is the winningest coach at Westfield High School history, in fact. We wish all 4 of our retirees well as they begin the next adventures in their lives. And also, the addenda tonight. Unfortunately, we have one of our principals, the principal of Tamaqua School, Mike Cullen, is ill and needs to follow doctor's orders for a bit, and he's going to be out of work for until about the end of March. So Tamaqua is an active and busy school with many elementary students. So tonight I am recommending that we appoint David Dulks as the acting principal while Mr. Cullen is out, and he would replace him from February 18th through March 25th. David Dulks is currently an assistant principal at Edison School and has great experience as an administrator, and I am sure he will do a great job at Tamaqua.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? All right. Okay.
Rich McKissick?
Yes.
Lucy Ziegler? Yes. Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Chris Leinhardt?
Yes.
Ginny Light?
Yes.
Gretchen Olich?
Yes.
Peggy Astor?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
All right, that brings us to facilities. Would note that the next facilities committee meeting is March 6th at 8 a.m., at which time we will be talking about project priorities district-wide, particularly in a time of significant budget constraints. So that will be a busy meeting. Look forward to reporting out on that. I would also report out on our last meeting of the facilities committee this past Thursday. That meeting came about beginning with a request from the Westfield Soccer Association to put temporary lighting on Keeler Field, and that request came into our business administrator approximately 3 weeks ago. Generally, the first step with any type of request like that is a discussion with the facilities committee to determine whether or not we're going to move the idea to the full board for public discussion. The facilities committee, as I said, did meet on Thursday, February 12th. We did agree as a committee to allow the Westfield Soccer Association to come make a presentation this evening. I know that Peter Franks and others from Westfield Soccer are here tonight. Peter specifically had expressed interest in giving the board a presentation, so I will be happy to have him do that. I know that Bruce Kaufman is here from the town. Certainly happy to hear Bruce's thoughts on field usage as well. I think it'll be a good education for the board. This is an information session on this topic. We will then obviously take board Q&A, and if there's members of the public here who want to have questions on that topic, you're certainly entitled to do so. So with that, I'll turn it over to Peter if you're ready to go.
First of all, thank you very much for having us, for meeting on the 12th, allowing us to put into words the proposal that we wrote in an email in order to try to put temporary lighting over at Keller Stadium. To say that it's simple, I mean, I think it is, but to go through the background of it, every spring, the high school teams, our youth teams in town, really merge very, very hard because A, grass fields are closed until April, if they're usable in April. Obviously it's dark, it's cold. We only have one lighted turf field in town to put many youth programs on, and even the high school users, as I spoke with Sandy many times, early March, they're only viable until 5:30, later into March maybe 6:30, into April, May, it gets later obviously with the sun. That's an easy piece. My thought was to put temporary lighting over at Keller. It's been a thought of mine for many, many years. Really felt the crunch this year, needing to do so. It's not that we're getting bigger. It's just that times are, everything's expanding as far as lacrosse, soccer, baseball, track, other, high school activities. We're not the only youth organizations that use the town fields. The high school uses some of the town fields as well. And we use some of the Board of Ed fields as well, but the point to just put up temporary lighting from non-usable time for historically non-usable for the high school, make it 7 to 9:30 for the youth users. I propose to use 4 diesel generator lights that are temporary, just Monday through Friday, not weekends, not game ready, just for practice, no games, no scrimmages, no whistles, no spectators. Utilizing the Edison parking lot to drop kids off. It's a, it's drop-off, pick-up kind of situation, just like it is down in Houlihan. We would absorb the cost. There'd be no cost to the district, quite frankly, other than maybe some extra potential wear and tear, which is really negligible because wear and tear really comes from the sun as opposed to people's feet. Quite frankly, I did a lot of research on turf use these last few weeks, and lighting, and noise, decibel levels. But the proposal is to put the temporary lighting in all 4 corners of the field, outside the fence, outside the track. The high school would get the benefit of using the lights between 4:30 and 7 o'clock at night, roughly 7 o'clock, whenever Sandy's programs end. That would include the kids running track, the kids using the field, people crossing the street after they're done. And then the youth group would come on Monday through Friday, 7 to 9:30. At 9:30 they exit. By 9:40 all the lights are off. The lights will go off systematically by hand until 9:40 to allow for safe egress from the facility. Diesel units run for 60 to 70 hours. So there'd be 1 refueling over the time frame, by the way, would be March, April, middle of May. To go longer would be great, but middle of May, the grass fields have dried out, the sun is out a little bit longer. We can make other arrangements, but there are no other arrangements to make in March and April to find space that's within 10 miles of Westfield and is affordable. So this is a very, very inexpensive, I'm not going to call it a fix, it's an inexpensive way to utilize the field to its best potential and give all the users, whether they be high school students within the high school programs or youth users in our town programs, to continue to train and practice getting ready for game day on Saturdays and Sundays. Nothing more than that. No lights on Saturday and Sunday, no games. As simple as that. Light for the ball at the feet. That's the proposal. We're prepared. I have insurance costs. The units are covered. We'll cover the cost of having the units there. We'll cover the workload. High school will put the lights on. We will turn the lights off. We'll provide a workload management system once we know what teams we're going to put there and when, if it's approved. We can't do that ahead of time because we don't know who the coaches are. And I know bottom line is that I'll probably be there every night at 9:30, which is my pleasure, quite frankly. I put a lot of kids through the high school and through the sports programs, and it's my way of making sure everything works right. So if there are questions for the board, please ask away.
Have we done this before? Have we had the lights on the field before?
The youth users, I don't think have used lights before. I know Sandy mentioned that she used lights last year temporarily during the football playoff season, because again, in the fall, late in the year, it starts to get dark, right? And I can't speak for Sandy. Sandy can answer for herself, but I don't think that there was any light visible other than on the field or noise that was complained about. So, and had it been done, I know that youth users for the past 15 years I've been on the board, we have not. I've thought about it. We've been able to mitigate things up until now. We can't anymore. We're maxed out. And the programs aren't any bigger, lax or soccer. It's just we're maxed out because time and space is getting tighter and tighter. But no, I don't think we've done it before. Sandy has. Yes.
Has this model been tried in other towns? Any research you've done on that? And
I'm a referee as well, so I'm at different fields that have portable lighting. These particular types of, it's Wanco, this particular diesel engine. And, Wardlaw has it, PDA, it's a private soccer group out in Somerset, they have this kind of lighting. I'm not sure where else I've seen it, but the lighting, you've seen it here in town. Water main breaks, they bring in one of those generators with a 15-foot boom and they put the lights down on the work site. That's what it is. The lights are 4 units. They can be twisted and turned and tilted down. The generators run, I've become a decibel expert if you want to hear about that, but they run quietly and efficiently, and the booms can be lowered and secured each night. or left in the upright position because they're on one of those balance platforms. So yeah, I have seen them. I haven't seen them in operation personally, other than on a water main break or something like that. But they're very viable for a practice. They are not viable for games because they're only 25 feet high. Either be it lacrosse balls, footballs, soccer balls. Once they go up out of the lights, you don't see it. That's an unsafe situation. For practice, it's perfect. The ball's on the ground and you're not playing games.
So tell us a little bit about the sound that's going to be, a couple things. First of all, the lights, once they're on for practice, tell us how far they're going to extend past the field, and also how much noise is going to be made by the generators while they're running.
Okay, so I did what everybody does nowadays. I went to Google. This manufacturers have specs, and they call it 71 decibels at 23 feet, which is equivalent to standing next to a vacuum. And that's the OSHA chart, by the way, not the manufacturer's chart. OSHA has 3 different types of things. For every 23 feet more that you're away from the unit, it goes down by 6 decibels. In the case of the school, I did a quick math. The closest property line might be 75 feet from one light, the others are hundreds of feet away. And they call it conversation. Is it conversation like it is here right now? Yeah, probably. I called the manufacturer's rep today. He said, yeah, you could definitely hear them. There's a hum. It's like the guy down the block, mowing his lawn. I said, okay, well, what's that in decibels? So to say, I haven't heard one. Sandy might be able to answer what it sounded like on the field. But 71 decibels at 23 feet is equal to a vacuum. 23 feet more is equal to human conversation. They even said that it sounded like a classroom. The chatter of a classroom. If you're inside the house, I don't think you're going to hear it. If you're outside on your back deck, you might hear a hum. If you're 200 feet away, I don't think you're going to hear it. I'm not 100% sure if you're going to hear it or not, or detect it. I know I don't hear a lot of questions at home, so. But yeah, there's that. It's an engine, but it is encased in a cowling. The gas tank is, everything's contained inside the cowling of the machine. The on-off key, the gas tank, everything else. So. They are very, very efficient. As I said, I spoke to the manufacturer today, and they did a study of 5 different manufacturers for the Tappan Zee Bridge project, because people were complaining about all the pounding of those, in the news of last year.
Yeah.
And they said that the Wanco lighting was picked for the project because it's the quietest generator. That back then when they were sensitive to noise. That's just an aside. He's going to send me that report. But again, 71 decibels at 23 feet is equal to standing next to a vacuum. I don't think it's a vacuum down at the car wash, but it's also not a little car vac.
Okay.
Okay.
And the lights will be focused on the field, so they're not shining.
Yeah, we're not lighting up a work area. We're lighting up the space on the field. Quite frankly, the way I presented that, where you see the red dots, that's everything outside the fence at the field, with the exception of the bottom left-hand corner. So that we could lock it. It's not interfering with the track. It will light up the track for the track kids that are going to be running, if they're still there, before or after dark. And the one that is closest to the field house would be closest to a private property line. I talked to Sandy about maybe putting that over by the pole vault pit. That part is a work in progress. The other 3 are hundreds of feet away from the property line. I don't envision that any noise, and you see I put those red lines myself. Obviously the lights will be facing in towards the center. I spoke again to the manufacturer. They said, you won't be able to have a game here. It won't be light enough. I said, that's okay, it's just practice. They said, oh, that'd be perfect. So I'm using that information. And again, we're trying to do it for a 10-week pilot. We'll see, we can adjust. I'm not a lighting expert, I'm not a decibel expert, but I've seen them used before, they're around, and it will make better use of the field, better use for us to be able to get all the kids out there that need to be out there, when it gets dark, and we don't have grass available.
Do you need 4 lights?
Not sure. As I said, the fellow that I talked to at the rental agency said that it would probably be dark in the middle circle, but each one of the units has 4 bulbs on it. We can light up 1, 2, 3, and 4 per unit and get to the safe level and if the safe level's 2 lights per unit, they will leave 2 lights on. But with all 4 lights on, with all 4 units, it still would light up the field and not the neighborhood.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering about you noted that 1 unit was closer to housing than the other 3. Would there be a way to eliminate that one?
There might be. There might be a solar solution as well, which I found out about today. But they're not as bright. But if it's just the one corner,
Right.
and they're more expensive, it might be a mix between them. Diesel's on one side, solar on the other.
And
That's new information just in from
No, that-
headquarters.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of how your rental agreement works, I mean, if this were not working after 2 weeks, you may find that you need to return the rental equipment. Is that I don't know how those contracts work, but
Nor do I. I hope that we don't have to test them, but I'm willing to take the risk.
more questions from the board?
I think you were going to talk about the refueling at one point. How
Yeah,
frequent
so
is
they
that
run
and
they
how
run
does
for
that
60 to
happen?
70 hours.
Uh-huh.
We're gonna, if Sandy turns them on at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I turn them off at 9 o'clock, 9:30 at night. So we're talking about 5 hours a day. It's going to be a month and a half before we need to refuel them. They have a trailer hitch. They're on wheels. We cart them out, refuel them at the gas station, and then bring them back.
They go off property to be refueled?
Absolutely.
No truck or anything comes in?
No,
like that? Okay.
no. Why bother? It'd be
Right.
easier to bring them to a gas station. You've seen them,
Yeah.
I'm sure, around.
Absolutely.
Tower comes down, folds over, gets on the back of a bumper hitch, and off it goes, and then it will come back fresh and ready.
Great.
I think so. It's going to be my bumper hitch, I think.
Maybe Sandy might be able to answer this more, but you talked about that the temporary lights are great for practices, but not for games. So I just kind of want to understand the difference between, especially lacrosse, the practices versus games. Like, I just want to make sure that, I'm concerned about the safety issue. That's sort of the big thing for me, and I just want to make sure that temporary lights aren't putting kids at a risk that they don't need to be at. Especially lacrosse, which is smaller ball, faster
Right.
pace, I guess.
Right. So from the soccer world, I asked some coaches recently about those who have training sessions with temporary lights like that. In other places they have them is out at soccer centers. They said, would they play a game with it? They probably would. They're soccer coaches, professional soccer coaches.
Right.
However, that being said, so do you practice, long crossing balls that night when you're on a temporary lit field? No. You do things with the ball at your foot. Lacrosse typically is a straight pass, on an arrow kind of thing. It's not a high arcing pass in the air where the ball's going to go out of the light. So they're teaching those kids to keep the ball either on a bounce pass or chest level, and we're teaching kids to keep the ball on the ground. And if you go to a soccer game, you'll hear a coach yell out, "Keep it down, bring it down, bring it down, bring it down." So it kind of ties in. You're forced to keep it down because you'll manage your practices due to the lighting situation, and you might get a better practice out of it. Little kids, they'll kick the ball up in the air.
Right.
This is really for the high school aged type of kids, the kids that need to train a little bit later at night because they're involved in high school activities in the afternoon and are part of our programs, later in the evening. I can get field time outside of Westfield, about 10 miles away, but it's at 9:30 at night. So you get home at 11:30. Not good. We have the field. We need the light. It's plastic. It's not grass. If we lit up a grass field, A, it wouldn't be until April, and B, we couldn't do it 5 nights a week or 4 nights a week or even 3 nights a week because you'd be overusing it again. Particularly in April when it's really soft and muddy. The best thing to do is to use the available asset that we have, and really commingle it. I did notice recently, I spoke to Sandy a little bit about it. I saw an article in the paper the other day that we're resurfacing the tennis courts over in Tamacas Park. Again, a whole set of fields over there that we commingle between the high school and the youth users. They're using the tennis courts, the soccer fields, the lacrosse fields. It's all part of the same community effort. And I think really that we need to get a couple hours a night over at a community asset that's a turf field that needs to have some temporary lighting that isn't obtrusive. I don't want to go to 10:30 at night. I get that. But we want to be as less obtrusive as we can and get the kids out there to practice in the springtime when there's a conflagration of sport, be it high school, youth, or whatever. It's very, very busy in the springtime. I know that I brought Scott McKenzie with me, who's been our scheduler for 5 years. He knows the intricacies of what we do. Bruce Kaufman does as well. Our program is 2,500 strong total, 1,200 in the springtime. You guys know all the numbers. It's just impossible to get the kids out there. And even at that, we still have 20 to 25 teams that are training on county fields in the afternoon or somewhere else. We're not making new teams just to get more field space. We're trying to manage what we have. It's been a struggle. We've done a great job, but we can do better, and we have the assets to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Can we, if we're not done, I'd like to hear from Sandy though, in terms of what this does for her in terms of our high school programs eventually. But if you have more.
Any more questions for Peter first from the board?
Yeah, I have 2 questions.
Jenny?
Peter, thank you for preparing yourself for coming to facilities and this evening. I think you answered my question about why this field or for the public at large. You mentioned extending the time for student athletes as well as for youth association athletes. So that makes sense from why this location as opposed to another location in Tamaulipas Park or another one of our schools where our student athletes don't practice. Number 2, the intent is to offer extra time for lacrosse practice, for the youth associations, for lacrosse practice, which is a spring sport, and for soccer, which is really a fall sport. So I know it's not a fall sport only in your mind where the leagues participate year-round. And I just want us to recognize that we're perpetuating this support of year-round youth athletic activity in a sport, in an out-of-season sport. For what it's worth, it may not, it's a little unnatural to me. I know it's natural now, currently.
Yeah.
But I wanted to.
And we're less all around than some other sports.
I understand. I just want us
if one of your children is a swimmer, you'll understand what I'm saying.
No, I know. I just want us to recognize that this is a commitment of that nature, which is a little bit different than just supporting an in-season sport activity. That's all. I don't know that it necessarily detracts from my support. But it just occurs to me that, okay, now we're stepping up to out-of-season training, drills, practice. That's all.
Yeah, the definition of out of season, I think, is
gone, right?
It could be a discussion for a lot of people, but I know I've been around it for 20 years. I know that Westfield's had a soccer program since 1973, and I know that they've been playing in the fall and the spring for at least 25 years, so it's not a new idea.
Not a new idea.
And again, the youngest are just in the fall, right? The pitter-patter little feet over Memorial Pool that I mentioned the other day. But the travel stuff, the people who choose to be more competitive, and again, the non-competitive youth that are involved in high school soccer in the fall, high school soccer, because they don't have a season to play in the fall. There is no competitive league for them to play in. They play in the spring, in their county, our older kids and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Another thing you mentioned at our committee was, and I briefly touched on it tonight, was the fact that you were providing security by locking these units to some kind of permanent structure.
I was going to lock them to the bleachers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice heavy gauge chain and take one wheel off if need be. I just got a quote today for. There's renter's insurance for the units that's provided by the company that rents them out. And we use Bollinger Insurance. Probably the high school probably uses Bollinger Insurance as well for youth. They have equipment insurance, and I got a quote from them today for theft and damage from, any tornadoes, hurricanes, whatnot, and/or theft. So they're completely covered.
Would we have to put up any signs, no climbing, or such?
I don't know.
Those signs are already up at the field.
Yeah. I suppose.
Any other questions for Peter from the board? All right, Peter, don't go too far. I suspect the audience may have questions for you. Sandy, would you mind just talking about the questions that were raised, and we'll see if the board has any other questions for you?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Do you want to ask me the questions first, or do you want me to just talk about some of the things that, I know one of the questions was, have we done this before?
Right.
And so this past fall, for 2 nights, we had portable lights. We only had 2 lights. And there were no noise complaints with that.
Just 2 nights?
2 nights, and we had 2 lights.
Okay.
Do you know if they were the same unit as they're proposing now?
They were not. These units are a bit more efficient and better sound. They cost more. These cost more. So.
And Sandy, those were used for practice because we were going to a state or sectional final.
Correct.
So they were unscheduled times at the end of the seasons where dusk
Yes.
started earlier.
Yes.
And so they were a similar situation,
Yes.
practice only.
Yes.
So
One-
if there-
I'm sorry, go ahead, Liz.
so there were 2, and if they were more expensive, more efficient, is that?
No, I mean,
I'm
those
just wondering if 2 did the job.
2 did the job
versus-
for football for about 30 yards.
Okay.
So that's why you would need the 4. The reason why these are more expensive, because they're more efficient and there's less noise.
Oh, his are more efficient. I
Yes.
misunderstood what you said. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We'd like to spend more money.
Yeah. That's what, okay. Makes
Just
sense.
One of the things that was useful for me to understand that I didn't before was just how this helps you in terms of our high school athletic teams and what it currently looks like and what it would look like if we were able to do something like this.
So our spring season has more teams than any other season, and that's a great thing to have. Our boys and girls track team, and oftentimes we forget that they use the track in the field because we think that while lacrosse is going on, they can still continue to run, and that's not always the case. So it will give us an extra hour and a half of practice. And so what happens now is that the track teams, the boys and girls track team, which were roughly are 250 kids, they have the full stadium, the field and the track until 3:30. And then once 3:30 comes, then lacrosse goes on, boys lacrosse will go on, and then girls lacrosse will go on. So it all kind of gets crammed in there. So my hope is that with the extra hour and a half, I could maybe possibly give track more time on the track, and then also give more time half-hour wise. I mean, an hour and a half is a lot for all 3 programs. It's actually 5 programs to have that extra half hour. So it would benefit every spring team that works down at that stadium.
Mitch, one of the things that Sandy talked about facilities was how, talk about safety precautions that have to be taken while lacrosse is playing on a field where we have kids running around the track or otherwise practicing. So this would just alleviate some of those.
Right, that's a good point.
Sure. And last year, the Westfield Booster Association purchased 6 more standards, portable standards with netting. So the nets now go up around the end zones of the field. And so there are times when at that 3:30 hour, track can still have some type of practice with more safety, more netting.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add to that, now that I think about it. Very, very hard for us to share a field. We can have a ginormous field, but you can't have soccer players next to lacrosse balls. Lacrosse players have helmets on, soccer kids don't. But even in your scenario, the more I think about it, half the field could go to lacrosse, maybe earlier or track later, whatever it may be. And again, those lights are tiltable. You move it over here for track, you move it over there for lacrosse, in the middle of the dark line,
Right.
theoretically. So you can squeeze out a little more time on half the field safely, as the case may need, There's some there's definitely some wiggle room in there to move those lights. I'm not saying turn around and light up Edison, but on the field itself. Because it's so big and it goes beyond the goalposts for football and whatnot, you could then have the field, the field part of track and field down on this side, and maybe now you have JV lacrosse and varsity lacrosse as opposed to having JV out on the grass. Something like that. There's a lot of ways to look at it, so it becomes beneficial for a lot more people for a lot, within the same time frame.
Any other questions for Sandy? Dana, does this add any burden to our maintenance people?
I don't think so. Not from our discussions on Friday, Thursday, whatever day that was. Most of it's gonna be Sandy's staff and Peter.
Yeah, I mean, the buildings will be closed after we leave, so the buildings won't remain open. So the maintenance should not be there. Shouldn't have to be there.
Any other questions from the board? Would it be valuable to the board to hear from Bruce Kaufman on field usage, or are we okay in that area?
Okay, I think I got it.
I mean, it's,
Yeah.
we've known about
Yeah.
field usage problems
Yeah,
for a long time,
that's-
so, okay.
Breaking news.
If the board has no further questions, then I would welcome any public questions or comments from the public. Sure, please just come to the front, give your name and address, and don't go anywhere, Sandy.
Greg Casco, 434 Everson Place. I want to thank the board president, Richard Matesich, first off, for responding to my email last week. After I'd read the article in the Westfield Leader about this issue, you responded within a day, I believe. And I thank you for that. I also thank gentlemen here for coming and answering some of the questions I had of the board. You actually answered most of them. I've lived in town for 42 years. I'm very well aware of the need for a feeder program in athletics. That's why we have such a successful high school sports program. Not only was I an athlete in that program, but I also coached my daughter's basketball. There's a field down at the end of Rawway Ave, Sid Fay Houlihan. And I have a question, perhaps Mr. Kaufman can answer this. How much time is used on that field by non-recreation athletics or non-town related sports teams, if any? Also, there was a word used in the Westfield Leader that this was going to be a pilot program. My concern as a resident, albeit I do not live next to the field, I live on Everson Place, and my street is at the front doors of Lincoln School. I'm not affected by it. However, when you say pilot program, is it a pilot program for something more permanent? I know back in the 90s, our neighborhood got together when a group had approached the Board of Ed and they wanted to put in a permanent lighting at the Westfield High School football field. And that was subsequently, I guess, voted down. They did not go that route. With these lights being temporary, and I believe when the football team was practicing for the state playoffs for those 2 days, it was to prepare them for a night game in Linden. Whether it be for the sun going down, and I thought it was for preparing for a night game. I am 110% behind providing field usage for our youth in this town. More and more, and as a product of the Westfield school system, as a student athlete, we don't have that three-star athlete or three-sport athlete anymore. They're very rare. Basically, you do have kids specializing in certain sports, but that's more towards the high school. At the youth level, we want to get as many kids involved as we can, and I'm all for that. My only concern is this a pilot program towards something more permanent? And I'd like to know, like I said, is there time that we can free up at Sid Fay Houlihan that's being used by non-recreation sports or non-recreation teams to allow our Westfield kids involved in Westfield Recreation or Board of Ed Athletics to utilize that field? Thank you.
Thank you. So let me address the first one, and Bruce, I'll have you address the second. On the question of whether this is a permanent situation, I think I'd address that in two ways. One is with respect to the lighting itself. So, is it permanent lighting? And when I think of permanent lighting, I think of sort of 4 fixed structures, much higher, capable of accommodating game situations. and probably about a $300,000 program. So is this a test program to see if we'd want to put in permanent lighting? No, that is not the way the facilities committee had looked at it. Looking at permanent a different way, we didn't view, when we talked about this as a 10-week program, the committee didn't view this as a 10-week discussion because that doesn't really solve the long-term practice time issue in town. So we did talk about could this be a good, I don't know if we used the word trial or I don't know if we used the word pilot, but it's irrelevant, the exact word. We did look at this as a period of time during which we could say, how is this 10 weeks going? Are there resident complaints? Are there issues with the lights? Are there tweaks we can make to the way the lights are structured in the event there are complaints? And if it did work, that there were no complaints and the lighting was valuable to both the school programs and the town programs. Our comment to the WSA is we would anticipate that people would come back the next year or at other times during the year and say, can we do temporary lighting? However this program goes doesn't mean there would be other times during the year there is lighting, but I think as a practical matter, yes, it would be, I don't know how I could say that wouldn't be a natural extension if this were a successful 10-week period. I hope that's responsive to your question. That's how we looked at it in facilities. On the issue of field usage at Houlihan Sid Fay and whether or not there are non-town user groups, I think was the question. If you'd like to answer that, Mr. Kaufman, I appreciate it. If you could just state your name and your position with the town.
Bruce Kaufman, I'm the Recreation Director for the town of Westfield. Thanks, Greg. I thought I got out of here without saying anything. To answer your question, I'm going through my mind of any non-Westfield organization that uses any field in town. Just so that everybody understands, I schedule all the fields in town, be it town or Board of Education. Doesn't make any difference, with the exception of Kaler. Sandy and I have had discussions over the past 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, about the extensive use of Kaler. I used to schedule Kaler also, and it really has come to the point that it's Sandy's backyard. The Board of Education needs it for all of their athletics, so it was decided probably 6 months or a year ago that any scheduling of Kaler specifically would go to Sandy, and I do all the other fields. In the entire year, in all the other fields, there's only one non-Westfield organization that uses Tamaqua Park softball field 5 and 6 on Sundays from 8 till 12 noon. Every other field in town, Houlihan, Sid Fay, elementary schools, middle schools, are all used by Westfield organizations, Westfield youth groups, and or Westfield adults. This is the first year that we have had to tell one of our user groups that have traditionally had time at Sid Fay and Houlihan that they no longer could have time because there are other sports organizations that, youth organizations that the Field Committee and the Recreation Commission felt should have a little more time going along with the in-season, out-of-season, and again, the three of us could stand here and talk about in-season and out-of-season. No more three-sport athletes. We just don't, right now, especially in the spring, do not have enough time to handle all the requests from the youth organizations in town, not the adults, the children. Okay. And I'd answer any of the questions if...
Did anyone on the board or in the audience have questions for Bruce? Any other questions from anyone on the field topic?
I have one question. Did George Kapner realize that he's going to get brand-new tennis courts? All he had to do was stay one more year.
I don't know. All right, well, so at the conclusion of the Facilities Committee meeting, we did note that this would be an informational discussion, because the Facilities Committee at that point had information, the rest of the board did not. It would be, we didn't think prudent to schedule anything other than information and discussion at this meeting. Unless there is hesitancy on the board to continue the discussion, I would say that we should calendar the next board meeting, March 3rd, for further discussion and action if the board deems it appropriate. If there are questions from board members, in the meantime, you should please forward them to Dana so that she can make sure someone is prepared to answer them. If there are questions from the public, you should also feel free to email them to Dana, and we can make sure that we're prepared to answer them. With that, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Dana, did we have anything else for facilities? All right, long-range planning, Ginny.
Yes, thank you. As I previously reported, in preparation for developing a new strategic plan for the school district, Long-Range Planning Committee met in December to discuss the development of a 2015 parent and community survey. The brief online confidential survey was emailed to a random number of parents and community members to gather their viewpoints on education in Westfield. At our January 6th meeting, I announced that community members would be receiving the survey in February, and through PTO newsletters in the month of January, we alerted parents to be on the lookout for the survey. On February 10th, recipients of the survey were emailed to advise them that the online survey would be available the next day. And since then, we have sent 2 reminder emails to those who have not yet responded. At this time, I'm very pleased to report that we have a 30% response rate, and our deadline has been extended to tomorrow, February 18th, and one last reminder is being sent tomorrow to recipients of the survey who have not yet responded. So I want to personally thank those who have responded to the survey. This is an important step in forming the basis for our school district's 5-year strategic plan. And very shortly this spring, we will present a report summarizing the results of the survey. And thank you to Lori Korecki for all her work in developing and administering the survey, and to Brian Auker, who, with all of his technology support, has made this possible.
Ginny, when did you say the survey opened?
The survey opened on February 11th. 1 week.
1 week. Do you think with the holiday weekend, 1 week is enough?
The response rate we had last year was about the same as or 5 years ago when we did the survey. It's about the same, right?
I mean, often actually, if you have a longer window on a survey, you know, people put it at the back of their to-do list, and then you get fewer responses. That's generally what you find with surveys. So we'll remind again. I'll tell you, the first group, we had 20% like this. It was amazing how quickly. We had some very efficient people, so we're glad to see that, and we'll hope some more completed after the next reminder.
Great.
I just have one question. Is 30% like an average for these type of surveys? Is it low, or where does it fall on the?
It's higher than an average.
It is higher than.
Yeah. Higher than average. And as I recall, I thought I had brought the notes with me. Our sampling is going to be about 3 to 1 parent to non-parent community members. So that's the sample sizes. So hopefully we'll get. That's the sample coverage. So hopefully we'll get more parent response, because that is the group that has more intimate knowledge in the questions that we're asking.
And we'll be able to break down the information, so from community members with children in our schools, and those who do not, and those who previously had children in the schools.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Jim?
No.
Thank you. Policies, Lucy.
Okay, I'd like to have the board consider policy 1100, the district organization, for first reading. Can I have a second? Thank you, Mitch. There was very few changes to this policy. We just pretty much added central staff administration, who actually that consisted of the assistant superintendent, BA, and human resource specialist. And other than that, we also made reference to policy 1110 as the organizational chart. Other than that, there weren't any changes to this. Any questions?
Rich Messessick?
Yes.
Lucy Beegler?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Leinhardt?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oley?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Okay, I'd like the board to consider for second reading, policy 1522. We're actually abolishing this policy because it wasn't required anymore. And the evaluation system that it refers to, I believe was replaced by CUSAC. And that's really sums it up. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Can I have a second? Thank you.
Lights.
Rich Messessick?
Yes.
Lucy Beegler?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Leinhardt?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oley?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
And do I need to do a second as well, just to have her to affirm the HIBs as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like the board to consider the board affirming the superintendent's decision on HIB incidents 15R03, 15E04, and 15E05 for the reasons set forth therein. Can I have a second? Ginny? Thanks.
Yep.
Rich Messessick?
Yes.
Lucy Beegler?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Leinhardt?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oley?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you very much. Curriculum, instruction, and program. Gretchen?
I'd like to ask the board to consider curriculum item number 1 to approve the district field trips as attached on number 4 to the agenda. Can I have a second? Mitch, thank you. Anybody have any questions about the field trips? Dana?
Rich Messessick?
Yes.
Lucy Beegler?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Leinhardt?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oley?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
And I'd like to ask the board to consider SIP motion number 2 to approve for the following, the curricula listed there for first reading. Can I have a second? Ginny, thank you. I sent curriculum notes around last night. Sorry for the late notice. I'm trying to get back in the swing of when the committees fall versus our Board of Ed meetings. But if anyone has any questions, so these are all revisions to current existing curriculum. The driver's education and the grade 5 social studies revisions were fairly significant, as I detailed in my notes. In particular, the grade 5 social studies curriculum it has been the subject of a very large 5th grade professional learning committee of teachers that have been looking to revise and revamp the 5th grade curriculum in anticipation of our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade curriculum being on the calendar, I think, in the regular cycle next year. I'm happy to try and answer any questions. Paul's unfortunately not with us tonight because he's homesick, but I'll do my best to field any questions if anyone has any. I know Lucy was talking to him today, but we can certainly talk about it more.
Sure. I just was curious, well, the 6th through 8th is being revised. So wanting to look at that before we revise 5th and see what the layout is, because I was looking at 5th grade currently talks about they learn North America, the 13 colonies, the Revolutionary War, all of that U.S. history. And up until that point, they're talking about their community and regions and things like that. If we're taking that, is this replacing that? Because I was just wondering where, then it looks like we're doing ancient civilization then with global and geography in 5th grade and then 6th. And then something in 7th, and then 8th, not till 8th grade, we're visiting U.S. history. So that's what it seemed like, and I just thought that was a long time to be looking at. I know generally they split it at some point, up until 1865, and then 1865 and forward. But that's a big amount of information to learn or wait till 8th grade. And I was just curious where that was going. And then my other question was, as far as what kind of program is it? Because you had mentioned textbooks and licenses. So with social studies, it's just forever changing. And as soon as it's in print, it's almost out of date. And I'm just wondering if it's cost effective to spend money there right now when there's so many things available that are free for resources. Especially with social studies, especially with global situations. If we can use virtual learning or use the use of novels or other ways to do it, or add more technology to the 5th grade classroom so they can utilize some of researching primary sources or things like that online. I'm not quite sure. When you had mentioned textbooks, I was surprised.
So I can't answer the U.S. history piece, and unfortunately, like I said, Paul's not here. I
Paul
don't
said he
know.
was going to look into that piece.
So do you want to? Otherwise, I'm happy to try and answer the second part.
I think we'd be fine to answer the second part. I actually think as I'm listening to the questions, we may have to bring this forward again with more information.
Right, I was thinking that too. I'll just say, and Peggy and Ginny, I think Peggy, you were there. Anything comes to mind from our committee meeting? I know we specifically talked about how things are constantly changing, and I know that one of the focus in revising this curriculum was feedback from the middle schools about what 5th graders are, when they're coming to Edison and Roosevelt, what are they missing? What are the pieces of social studies that they're just not getting? And so it's a much broader, almost kind of an investigative strategy to learning social studies. So answering very specific questions and then applying that to a broader range to countries all over the world. And so I tried to detail that in my notes, and unfortunately I didn't bring them, so I'm not being as articulate. But I do know that Paul, we did have a very robust conversation about the fact that maybe spending money on textbooks was not the smartest way to proceed, given especially that we have budget constraints. And looking at potentially just getting a set of textbooks for the class instead of for every student, ways that we can use secondary sources, the teachers' resources that are all online to kind of supplement the learning. And also there's a really big emphasis on interdisciplinary work in social studies, so using kind of the middle school or the elementary school curriculum for reading and writing, and
That's what I was mentioning. It was hard through email. That's what I was trying to get across.
That's something that I'm confident that Andrea and her team considered in doing this. And if you read the curriculum, I think it's apparent in there. But I'm happy to take. I don't think that there's any time stress here. So if we can table the social studies curriculum, get some more fulsome answers from Paul, and then bring it on for first reading next time.
And I think that just in adding to your comments, we did talk about purchasing the books and how much the books would be used and so forth. And I think at the time they spoke about the teachers' guides and manuals being much more important than the books themselves. Ideally, they would like one set as a classroom set, but that would be in budget constraints and so forth, is to have the teacher manuals and so forth as most important, and be able to use online sources and so forth.
So I would modify my motion to ask the board to consider for first reading the physical education and fine arts curriculum, and we will table the social studies curriculum for now, if I can have a second. Ginny, thank you. Anything else? Okay, Dana.
Rich Mutesic?
Yes.
Lucy Beegler?
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Chris Langhart?
Yes.
Jenny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oldig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
And then finally, I'd like to ask the board to consider the list of curricula for second reading identified in item number 3. Can I have a second? Mitch? We've talked about these before. Anybody have any new questions? Dana?
Rich Mutesic?
Yes.
Lucy Beegler?
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher?
Yes.
Chris Langhart?
Yes.
Jenny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Oldig?
Yes.
Peggy Oster?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
I just have one comment, because I wasn't here last time, but I love the blog writing. I do.
It
I
is
think it's such a
very
great
cool.
idea.
Very, very cool.
Say it.
Anything else?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Finance, in Mark's absence, I'd ask the board to consider finance motions 1 through 6 and 8 through 25, noting that 7 has been withdrawn from the agenda. Can I have a second?
Second.
Ginny, thank you. Before I ask Dana to talk about a few of these resolutions, I would just like to call to everyone's attention resolutions 20 through 25, and I think it's just important to call these out. A gift of $371 from the Westfield High School PTSO to the Westfield High School to purchase a Chromebook. A gift of $573 from the Westfield High School PTSO to the Westfield High School to purchase whiteboards in memory of Mr. Wojcik. A gift of $1,000 from the Westfield Coalition of the Arts to the Westfield High School Band Program. A gift of $99 from the Westfield Coalition of Arts to the Roosevelt Intermediate School Arts Department to purchase an Apple TV. A gift of $3,000 from Mr. and Mrs. Ives to the Washington School to purchase new books and other materials for the library. And a gift of $28,050 from an anonymous donor to the high school to purchase 30 laptops, a laptop cart, printers, and printer supplies. We really do appreciate and thank you for each and every one of those gifts. With that, Dana, do you want to go back to the first resolution and talk a little bit about the bond refinancing? Thank you.
We had bonds that were issued in October of 2007, which we are now, this is the first time we've been able to refinance them because there's restrictions on when we can refinance. Our financial advisors have looked at this, done an analysis. They believe that we could save about $200,000 if we refinance them now. And that's net of the issuance costs, because there are costs associated with refinancing, but that's after the cost of refinancing. So because this is a refinance, it actually works different than a bond sale. A refinance requires a first reading and a public hearing and a second reading. So this would be the first reading on the bond ordinance. Then we would advertise next week, or actually I think it's the 19th we were advertising. And then March 3rd, we would hold the public hearing and we would have a second reading and adoption. What we would also have on March 3rd, if you recall, we had an SDA grant dating back to like 2001 and that we were owed over $1 million from the state. Because the paperwork had never been submitted, we never got the money from the state. So the paperwork was submitted this year to the extent that we could submit it because it was so old. There were things that we just couldn't locate. So we received all of that grant except for $274,000. We have to sell bonds to make up for that shortage. That will be on March 3rd as well. We already have approval. A bond referendum was approved way back in 2001, so we have approval to sell the bonds. So that would also go in on March 3rd as a resolution to approve, and we would save some money by refinancing and issuing those bonds together because it would all be done at one time, which is also why we're doing that at this time as well.
Thank you. And do you know just roughly what the savings of the refinancing would be, sort of net of the issuance expenses?
$200,000.
$200,000.
It's net.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Any other items to?
And then number 2 is just approving McManaman and Scotland as our bond counsel. They've been in the district for many years. They're experts in bonds, and so we hadn't, I thought we had done it at reorganization. We hadn't approved them, so we're approving them now as our bond counsel.
Okay. So these kind of felt like annual resolutions, is that why?
That one usually, yeah.
Okay.
McManaman and Scotland usually is, but they weren't on the reorg.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on that? Jenny?
Yeah, I think it's of value for Dana to mention a little bit about item number 3, the agreement with the American National Red Cross to use our facilities as a shelter.
Right, we had a request from the American Red Cross to use some of our facilities as shelters in the event of a natural disaster or an emergency. The facilities committee met in the fall and looked at the agreement and had some questions and wanted some changes in the contract, and Rick Hatflow also read the contract and made some changes. So what we're doing now is approving it, but it's important to note that we still have the right to refuse if there's a disaster, but it would interfere with, if it's not a disaster that would cause us to close schools, we could still refuse if it would be, an interference with our schools opening or functioning.
And also any costs incurred
Will be borne by
are
the
borne
Red
by
Cross.
the
Correct.
Red Cross.
Right.
Kristen Chesick?
Yes.
Lucy Bugler?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes.
Chris Langmark?
I will recuse myself and abstain from voting on 1 and 2, and yes to all the rest.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen
Yes.
Oldley?
Yes.
Peggy Alster?
Yes.
Rich Slater?
Yes.
All right. Dana, anything else on the funding?
Yeah, we have budget to talk about.
All right.
Details.
Take it away.
So we are still waiting on state aid information from the state, which we expect to get next week. And we're still working on the budget, but we wanted to kind of give you an overview of where we currently are, and what the schedule looks like. So this is the calendar for the budget, slightly revised from last time, to include tonight as a budget discussion. We expect Wednesday or Thursday of next week to get state aid information. The governor's speech is on Tuesday, so we usually get it within 48 hours. On March 3rd, we're going to have a workshop on the budget, so at that point, we hope to have detailed information about the budget. And then on March 17th, we'll adopt a tentative budget, which is due in the county office by Friday, March 20th. Last year, you'll recall, the state changed the timeline. We used to have the budget process done much quicker. Now they've extended the time for the county to review the budget by a month. So our public hearings are pushed back until the end of April, and our final adoption is also pushed back until the end of April. So at our January board workshop, we used the guiding change document that we had talked about at our January 10th workshop as a guide for the budget preparation. So just to remind everybody, what the board came up with at that meeting. So the first column there shows the realities of the budget. So the tax levy increase is limited to 2%. Plus optional waivers for specific increases. We're still expecting or hoping state aid to remain level, or possibly decrease. Fund balance is available for use in the 15-16 budget at the $1.4 million level, but we don't expect to have that much available for future budgets. We anticipated, and tonight we'll show you that that is in fact the case, that a budget that maintains existing programs and services would exceed the cap. The board may consider a separate proposal for technology or other items that are not mandated. We are anticipating approximately 3.8 additional staff for enrollment increases in certain grades. So although we don't have overall enrollment increases, there are increases in certain grade levels where we think we may need to add staff. We have contractual salary increases of 2% with almost all of our associations. Our health insurance increases are well in excess of the 2% cap, and that's after the increase in employee contributions that we'll see from this year to next year. And our special ed costs continue to rise beyond these caps. The middle column, so the board said in preparing the budget, we will not, and these were the constraints on what we could not do. Significantly increase class size, that we said we would not reduce the 2% that we're allowed to hold in reserves of fund balance, and that's money that we can hold for emergencies. We said that we would not make reductions that are inequitable, and that we would not eliminate courses recently approved by the board. Third column, the 2016 budget will direct the BOE to make technology a priority and to fund the amount requested by the committee, that we would stay within the 2% cap plus eligible waivers, and that we would reduce the fund balance that we use as a revenue from 1.4 million to 1 million. So as I talked about briefly in the first column, although we've been using 1.4 million for several years as revenue in the budget, we know that we're not going to have that beyond next year's budget, so we wanted to start reducing that so that the impact in 16-17 would not be as much if we have to reduce that to 500,000 or whatever number it is at that point. So, on the revenue side of the budget, the tax levy increase will be, on the first draft, is 2% plus a waiver for the health insurance. That waiver was about $1 million for health insurance. We are still assuming basic state aid at the 14-15 level. Extraordinary aid, that's extraordinary aid for special ed costs, and we have been budgeting $1 million in aid in that category. For several years, we received about $1.3 million. Last year, we received only about $980,000. We're not sure where that aid is gonna go. So right now in the budget, I have $975 in there as an estimate, just to be conservative. If we get any more information, we can look at increasing that a little bit, but just based on last year, I reduced it a little. Right now, I have $1 million in revenue coming from fund balance. So let's just talk about what this is gonna look like though in the legal budget. We have fund balance, we can only keep 2%. Anything above 2% has to go into the reserve accounts or has to be used for tax relief the following year. So when we were making deposits into the reserve accounts in the fall, the finance committee specifically decided to keep $1.4 million available for the budget, knowing that we were probably gonna start reducing that, but we wanted to have it available because we didn't wanna take that option away from us right off the bat. So we do have $1.4 million that we have to use in some way in this budget. So what I've done right now in the first draft, I have $1 million being used for recurring revenue expenses, and I have $456 going into the maintenance reserve. So we could have done that in the fall. We chose not to do that in the fall to give us the option, but we have to do something with the $1.4 million. So that's where it is right now. So we can increase the $1 million back up to the $1.456 million, which will help us when we get to the next slide. But then we project having a problem the following year, an even bigger problem the following year. And the first draft of the budget, we also have an increase in building rentals, and most of that is due to the fact that we have the Stephen Cates Camp that you approved, I think it was last month, or December. It's gonna be used in Franklin School, and they're paying us $36,000 in rental revenue. So most of that, I increased it by $50,000 because we had other areas that we hadn't been budgeting the full amount. So that helped us a little bit as well. Now on the expenditure side. So the first draft of the budget is approximately $2.4 million over cap. Not really a surprise. We've been talking with administrators and supervisors literally since September, saying that we knew that this year we were gonna have a problem with the cap, that we had to look at areas of reduction. So why are we over cap? These are the areas of the budget that are increasing more than 2%. Staffing is increasing a little more than 2%. As I mentioned, it's because of the additional, salaries are going up 2%, but then on top of that, we had to add staff for enrollment increases. Health insurance and other insurances are going up more than 2%. Most school districts have insurance for property and casualty through New Jersey School Board's insurance, and I know you're all aware of the fire that was in Edison, and one of the big issues in that school that burned down in Edison was they were insured for replacement value. Replacement value means different things to different people, and one of the issues that they're having is when you build, all of our facilities are very old, and they don't meet today's code. They are grandfathered in so that we're allowed to use them. But if the building burns down and you now have to meet today's code, there was a gap in what Edison was getting. I think they still are having this problem between what is considered replacement value of the old building. So for instance, a kindergarten class that might currently be 800 square feet and not have a toilet in it, if you were to build a new building, it would have to be probably 1,000 square feet and have a toilet in the room to meet current code. But that's not what the insurance might cover. So every district in New Jersey is looking at probably significant increases in property insurance, because this is gonna be something that's gonna have to be addressed in with our, property coverage. So right now, I don't know what that increase is gonna look like, but I have like a 15% increase in there to cover that. Since I'm anticipating I'm anticipating some kind of increase there. Our health insurance right now, we're getting projections of about 13% increases. Our last 6 months, we did have a very good experience. If you'll recall, all of last year, we had really bad experience in our health insurance. So even though we've had a good 6 months, right now they're looking at, they always look back 12 months, and 6 of those 12 months were bad. So we're hoping as we get closer to June, when we actually do renew our contract, that our experience will continue to be doing well, and that we'll get a lower than 13% increase. But that's the number I'm getting right now from our brokers, so that's what I'm budgeting. Special education continues to increase beyond 2%. Technology is beyond 2%, and I have some slides to detail what's in technology. And our utilities, and most of the utility increases in our electric, which we know is from the air conditioners that we've allowed to be installed in the elementary schools. So we have an increase in the budget to accommodate that. So where are we looking to make reductions? As I said, we have been talking with all of the administrative staff literally since September. We have been doing pretty much nothing but looking at the budget in the last 3 to 4 weeks and looking at areas where we can make reductions. We're continuing to investigate those areas, but these are some of the areas that we're looking at. One is transportation. And one of the things we're looking at right now, we have 3 buses that transport kindergarten kids. One goes to Wilson, one goes to Franklin, and one goes to Washington. One bus has like 11 kids, one bus has 8 kids, and one bus has 7 kids, something like that. Those 3 buses cost us about $86,000 a year. So what we're looking at is reducing that to 1 bus that would possibly stop at 2 of those schools or 1 of those schools. We have to look at where kids live and make sure if anybody lives over 2 miles from one of those schools, we would have to go to 2 schools. So we're looking at possibly reducing that to 1 bus, which could save us probably about $50,000. We're also looking at consolidating other runs to see if we can get some efficiencies from those runs to reduce buses on, for buses that don't have a lot of kids on them right now. Stipends, we're looking at all stipends in the district and seeing where we can do without paying people to do particular items and seeing if we can reduce there. We're looking at reducing the professional development, the number of days we pay for subs for teachers to go out of the district, so if we can reduce the number of days that they're out, we can also reduce our sub costs. So we're looking at that. We're looking at staff across the board. 80% of our budget is staff and benefits that go with the staff. So when you're talking about making reductions of $2.4 million, you're talking about making reductions in staff. It's the only way we can get there. So we're looking again at the additional staff. First at the additional staff we added to see if we could possibly do without that, and then looking at other areas to see where we can be more efficient or where we can, least impact to the programs that we can. And then we're also looking at doing something different so that we reduce the number of staff eligible for health benefits, which will certainly help us on the health benefits side. Other things that we're looking at, we talked about the RAP program. So what that would allow us to do, if we increase that program to 132 students, we can't use that as revenue in our budget, but what we can do, and I'm working with the auditors to make sure we're doing this the way we can according to the law, some of those expenses, like the principal's salary, the custodian, the nurses, secretaries, whatever time we can estimate that they spend on the RAP program, we can charge a portion of their salary, so it takes it off of the operating budget and would get charged to the RAP program. So that actually could significantly help us to the tune of about $150,000 by increasing the program to 132 kids. So we're finalizing that to get those numbers correct. We looked at increasing the student activity fee. We currently budget $165,000 in revenue. We don't quite receive that much revenue. We receive, I think, about $150,000. If we increased the fee from $125 to $150 for the athletic part of it, and the clubs from $60 to $70, we could increase our revenue there by another $17,000 or so. And then we are looking at other changes. We're scheduling changes that we may be able to make that would allow us to reduce teachers and, you know, possibly be more efficient in the way we schedule, but we haven't finalized that either yet. So on the technology budget, some of these, I've mentioned this the last 2 years that I've been here, but as each budget that I do here, I've been reallocating things to different accounts. I've found some things that are not charged where I believe they're supposed to be charged, so I've made some reallocations, and some of that is what you'll see. Some of the increases and decreases that might look a little weird here might be reallocations. But the tech budget is going up from 14-15 budget of $1.6 million. We are, right now, we have $2.1 million in next year's budget. And here's a breakdown of the accounts, but here's really where the increase is. So as you know, last year we upgraded switches and the Wi-Fi at the high school. The next logical thing would be to do that at the intermediate school. So we're told that the switches are all beyond their useful life. So we have $242,000 in next year's budget to upgrade the switches at the intermediate schools. And then we have $279,000 to upgrade the Wi-Fi at the intermediate level. And then just because of all of the stuff that we did last year, our maintenance costs have risen by about $20,000. So our increase is $541,000 in technology. So some other options for technology that we could look at, and we are looking at, that would help us reduce our over cap amount. We could finance the replacement of the switches and the upgrades, which is what we did at the high school. So that would allow us to save some money if we did that. We could also phase in some purchases of equipment that we currently have in the budget that would help us a little bit. Then we have two other options. One is to put out a separate question in November, so that would pull the technology. We'd have to look at which pieces of it we could pull out. We certainly couldn't pull out licensing things, and so the whole $2 million couldn't be pulled out, but it would be the parts that we could live without, and we could put that on a separate question on the November ballot. So if it got voted in, we would do it. If it didn't get voted in, then unfortunately you can't say, okay, now we're going to cut something else and move the money over here to do this. You just wouldn't be able to do it at all. So that's the risk you run with that. But it is an option. Rather than making massive reductions in the budget, we could do that. We could also consider a bond referendum. And again, we have to look at this, and George Duthie, our architect, is looking at this already to say, because not all technology expenses would qualify to be covered under a bond referendum, but some would. And I think the switches would and the upgrade would, because that's an infrastructure thing. So he's looking at that as well, so that's also an option. That would also pull this out of the operating budget and out of the cap. So the difference between the separate question and the bond referendum, the separate question would be a 1-year hit to the taxpayers. So if it was, say it was $1 million, in 1 year the tax levy would go up $1 million to pay for that. If it was done as a bond referendum, it would be over the useful life of that. So whatever that was determined, whether it was 10 years, 15 years, I don't know where technology falls. So then the taxpayers would be paying for it for a longer period of time, but the tax levy would only go up a little bit each year to pay for that, or a little bit to pay for that, versus the one-time hit on the tax levy. So that's the difference between the second and third options there. So the next steps are where we go from here. Next week we get state aid information. If we see a reduction in state aid, God forbid, That's gonna make that $2.4 million a higher number by whatever reduction we see in state aid. We have finance committee meetings scheduled for next Friday and the Friday after. So depending on what information we get next week, we'll be making recommendations, and then on March 3rd, we would anticipate telling the board exactly what recommendations we're making for getting the budget to cap, because March 17th, we would have to adopt that budget. So that's where we are right now. Anybody have any questions?
After that uplifting presentation. I have a question just about timing. So we agreed to use this guiding change document to kind of guide us through the budget process this year. And we know it's a living, breathing document that's intended to change, but we're also tied to the calendar that the state's given us for getting the budget. So at what point do we have an opportunity? It sounds like perhaps the first point is after we get state aid numbers next week and we go to finance to say we have to change the guiding change document. These are no longer acceptable options to us. Is that, am I right that that's the first point that we'll have to really take a look at it as a board?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. I just don't want to be, I just want us to stay on top of that, because I don't want us to get to a point where it's just, if that is our guiding document through this process, I don't want to be wed to it, but I want us to be true to it and not get, stuck at a point where we don't have the ability to reference it.
Right.
Anna, does the healthcare waiver cover, how much of the excess over 2% does that cover?
It covers most of it. It doesn't cover about 400,000 of it.
And you mentioned enrollment increases. Where are they primarily?
Elementary schools. I want to say
Mainly, I think. Yeah.
Wilson. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Not Wilson.
Jefferson.
I think Jefferson's done.
It was three teachers at the elementary level. I can't remember which schools.
Right, and in a given grade, it doesn't take too many students to require another section at the elementary level with our neighborhood schools. So.
Right.
And then with respect to technology, are we going to be doing a separate presentation on that? Because it's hard to talk about that kind of number without knowing what's coming in each of the next several years.
Yeah, the plan is to talk about that at our tech meeting this week, and hopefully have that presentation, within the next few board meetings. Right? I mean,
Yeah, they don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we only have a couple board meetings.
Right.
Dana, going back to the health insurance waivers, do we have to apply for that to the state? Can they approve it? Can they reject our waiver request?
I don't believe they could. No, it's pretty automatic.
Okay.
I have to submit, back up to them to show that I didn't make up the number.
Right.
But once I wouldn't expect to have any issues.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think we said we've been talking to some of the principals about where we can cut costs over the past year or so. Is there a time frame to that? Are all those suggestions and conversations done, or is that ongoing, that's still being implemented?
Oh, they're ongoing.
Right.
Dana and I spend part of today talking with people, and sometimes when they don't come up with their own thoughts, we do a few suggestions. So it's definitely on, and it's difficult. People really are, when we see something that is not needed, we tend to cut it right away. We don't wait for this. So it is difficult, but those conversations are absolutely ongoing, and I tell people they can, shoot me emails in the middle of the night, and we'll look at it in the morning, and we've been doing that. So they're absolutely ongoing.
How will that resolve itself? So will we end up getting a list of the suggestions, or?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be, okay.
Yes.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Anything else, Dana, for finance?
No, I think that's enough.
All right. Legislation, Brendan?
No report at this time, but I'll be sending an email out to the members. You want to try and get a meeting in the next couple weeks.
Thank you. Technology, Mitch, anything?
No, we'll report after this week.
All right, I would ask the board to note the notes for the record. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Any liaison reports? All right, I would then recognize the public for questions and/or comments on any topic. All right, if we would just take it one at a time, please just come to the microphone, state your name and address, and
Thank you, Board of Ed members and Dr. Dolan, for the opportunity to speak. I'm here to discuss 4 specific things.
could you just...
Amy Flax, 93 Fairhill Drive, Westfield, New Jersey. Once again, thank you. I'm here to discuss 4 specific things regarding the upcoming park test in Westfield, New Jersey. First, thank you for serving the children of Westfield, New Jersey. Secondly, I want to commend Mr. Renwick and Dr. Nelson on the ingenious park implementation at Westfield High School. I appreciate the fact that testing was kept to a minimum total of 10 days, whereas many districts will be using the fully allotted 40 days. I am thankful that instruction will be running concurrently during the administration of the park. All of their thoughts and efforts into the implementation of very technology-driven test is greatly appreciated. Number 1, 2016, 17, and 18 graduation requirements. Since the park is new and it is not a graduation requirement, the Commissioner has stated other requirements for graduation in December 2nd, 2014 letter. These other requirements have not been clearly communicated to high school parents and guardians in the district. All parents should know what the PSAT, ACT Aspire, SAT, ACT, ASVAB, AFQT, and Acuplacer scores are for graduation, as well as the alternative portfolio assessment. Many students at the high school are not even taking the math park because they are enrolled in courses beyond Algebra 2. Clearly, these other scores will be needed for graduation requirements. With the potential passage of Bill A4190, which puts a moratorium on park scores for 3 years, these alternative requirements will be necessary for graduation. These requirements and alternatives should be communicated clearly with all parents and guardians. The December 2nd, 2014 letter from the State Department of Education should be sent to all parents and guardians. And just for the record, I'll just paraphrase, since that notification, we have been able to develop Concordia cut scores for additional substitute assessments that our schools currently utilize. Thus, the table below has been updated. For the classes of 2016, 17, and 18, students will be able to demonstrate proficiency in both ELA and math by meeting one of the criteria in each column below. There's the passing park scores for grades 9, 10, 11, SAT for ELA, SAT of 400 or higher, ACT of 16 or higher, Acuplacer 6 or higher, PSAT 40 or higher, ACT Aspire, AFQT, 31 or higher, and or meet the criteria of the NJDOE portfolio appeal. Mathematics, there's the park scores for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. The ACT greater than 400. SAT greater than 400, ACT greater than 16, Acuplacer Elementary Algebra greater than or equal to 76, PSAT 40, ACT Aspire greater than 422, and the ASVAB AFQT greater than or equal to 31, or meet the criteria of the NJDOE portfolio appeal. I have 2 high school students in these classes, and I feel that it is imperative that all parents have this information. Secondly, Westfield refusal plan. I believe that all parents and guardians should have a choice on whether to refuse state or federalized standardized tests. Already, 135 districts have documented policies on test refusals. It is time that Westfield provides the same choice to parents and guardians. At Westfield High School, instruction is always occurring during the park administration.
due to the incredible planning by Dr. Nelson. It would be very easy to accommodate non-test taking students because they can just attend their class that is already in session. Please consider giving parents a choice. Parents and guardians may even choose different options for their kids. Honestly, most children will end up taking the test. I believe strongly that parents and guardians should have the choice. Number 3, educational disruption due to the park. All computers need to be decommissioned several weeks at the high school in order to administer the park test. This test is clearly causing an education disruption when students need computers to conduct research and need computers for other instruction. Many 11th graders are in the process of writing their junior research paper. No standardized test should cause this level of disruption when technology is needed for day-to-day instruction. Number 4, Westfield Board of Education, please stand up. I know that this is a trying time for the district when the district is required to administer these new state standardized tests, which really seem to make very little sense. It is of grave concern to me, as I am sure many, that Pearson has paid millions of dollars to develop and implement these tests. Pearson is also a textbook company. Pearson stands to profit on remediation materials for students who perform poorly on the park. In addition, this test is causing an educational disruption in our schools. I, as a parent, a taxpayer, and a Westfield citizen, ask that you, the Westfield Board of Education, take the courageous step as a board that represents the children of Westfield and work on a similar resolution as the Bridgewater Raritan Board of Education about the rush into the park testing. I believe it is important to speak up to those in charge of New Jersey's education, i.e. the governor, the commissioner of education, the state board of education, and the legislator, about how the race to implement the park has put unreasonable strain and stress on school districts, administrators, boards of education, teachers, and most importantly, students. Anyways, I do have a copy of the Raritan Board of Education resolution, if you would like, as well as the letters from December 2nd stating all the graduation requirements. And I would just like to say once again, thank you for your service to the children of Westfield, New Jersey, and I will leave the letters and the resolution with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Drew Escaldi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm here before you with a heavy heart tonight to speak to you of my disappointment with Dr. Dolan and the school board. Up until now, I have been a proud supporter and for a number of years volunteer in the activities of this school district. I fully understand that you are bound by the mandates of the state, and based on Mr. Hespe's letter of this past October 12th, you are mandated to administer the park and treat non-testing students as discipline problems. But thanks to a grassroots movement of parents and teachers who would not tolerate this infringement on theirs and their children's constitutional rights, this changed, and Mr. Hespe backed down. Unfortunately, this district, despite the action of many other districts in the state, did not follow suit. Because of this lack of leadership and the obvious lack of communication, rumors and confusion were allowed to fester. Teachers at the high school told kids they could not graduate without the test. We know this is not true. An honors math teacher pleaded with the students to not listen to their parents and just take the test. Obviously, this is not okay. There are rumors circulating that the school will lose its state funding, what little there is, if we do not get a 95% participation rate. We know that's not true. Some schools have told parents their refusals have been accepted. Some schools have told parents their children must take the test. Even within the school, one individual school, there have been mixed messages. Overall, as a result of, mostly of a groundswell of parent-led actions, there is an overwhelming support for accommodating non-testing students in a humane and educationally sound manner. The Park 2015 Spring Computer-Based Test Administrator Manual, as well as multiple Park customer support cases, clearly indicate that non-testing students are prohibited from entering the test environment. New Jersey Education Commissioner Dave Hesby has since stated, "We should not automatically assume that coming to school and not wanting to take the test is a disciplinary problem." Strauss Esme Associates LLC, a leading education policy legal consulting group that provides policy and guidance to about 75% of all New Jersey school districts, recommends an alternate setting for non-testing students. The Assembly Education Committee supports Bill A4165, which ensures that students refusing high-stakes standardized tests are treated humanely. 136 New Jersey districts as of today and counting have park refusal policies that accommodate non-testing students with alternative venue or activities, including Union and right next door to us, Scotch Plains Fanwood School District. The New Jersey Department of Education has inappropriately engaged in a campaign of spreading misinformation intended to intimidate school districts into adopting punitive policies towards children whose parents refuse the park test. We will not lose funding if less than 95% of our students participate. We expect every school in Westfield to be on the same page. We expect our constitutional rights to direct our children's education to be upheld. We expect our children to be protected from the sit and stare policy. Forcing children to sit and stare at a test that has been refused by their parents is psychological child abuse and will not be tolerated. We do not expect students to be retaliated against because we exercised our fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of our children, as granted by the Supreme Court. In short, is this a district that won't allow students to read in school? The test is 2 weeks away. The time for action is now. We await your prompt response. Thank you.
Yeah. If it's okay, I just want to respond to a few things. So every administrator in this district has been working for 2 years to prepare for this. It is a mandated test. It is true there are bills out there, and if those bills change something, then they'll change something. But right now, public school districts are required to test their students. We are required to have 95% participation. That is still in effect. No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. I've checked it myself. I've reached out to the Department of Education. It is required at the federal level, and it is required at the state level, and both of those offices have made it very clear that that still is in effect. We are required to test all students. We have been forever. We have been since No Child Left Behind has been in effect. Every child has to be tested. Having said that, as was stated before, we have worked really hard to limit how much instructional time is going to be affected. The Board of Education has, we've also worked very hard to try to communicate, and if that hasn't been the case, I apologize. But for example, on our website, on the frequently asked questions, it does list the various options for graduation requirements that you referenced, which is incredibly confusing, even though you explain them well, but it is very confusing. We are trying to make it as easy as possible. We ask the parents who have written letters, could you be patient? Because they are having meetings down in Trenton, and they may change something, and that's fine. But I'm not going to change something this week, and then Trenton changes something again. In the meantime, we've reached out to get guidance both from the New Jersey Department of Education and also from attorneys. And I hope that everybody in this room and everybody in the district knows we'd never force a child to do something that their parent didn't want them to do. We will follow what we need to do, but we just wouldn't do that. And all the principals have been in communication regularly, and we continue to work really hard. The teachers are working hard. This is new for everybody, really is. I have to say, preparing over 5,000 students to be able to take a number of sessions of the test online, I mean, you can imagine what an upheaval that is, how much work has to go into that. I would tell you that The students have learned a lot by practicing various aspects of the test. The teachers have learned an awful lot. In the future, the kids we have in school now, their assessments going forward are not going to be paper tests. They're just not. I mean, already most adults deal with that now. They're going to be online. Our teachers need practice in how do you administer a test like that. It's completely different. Our principals are the ones who train our teachers each year to administer tests. They need to all of a sudden become experts in how to administer this, and they've been working very hard at it. We used part of our professional development day last week to focus on that, and I visited almost every session, and I can tell you how engaged the adults in the room were, and they were all learning. And we have to learn how to do these online assessments. On the other hand, do I think PARCC is a perfect test? Yeah, not so much. I don't. However, we are learning, and it's not as though Westfield went out and chose PARCC. You know, we would have had plenty of discussions if we were choosing. We're a public school in New Jersey. It is the test that's required. And we are respecting the parents. We'll certainly respect our students as we do each and every day. We've tried to limit the intrusion into the rest of the workday. We have different schedules at every level. The high school one was mentioned already. The intermediate is very different, so we can contain it within teams. And instruction continues with every other team in the school. At the elementary level, we also are containing it because you have separate classes in most cases. So we have been working hard. We have been attempting to communicate, and we are focused on the over 5,000 students who will be taking online tests in this district, and we will work with other parents who have concerns or questions.
Thank you. Come back to the microphone, please.
Dr. Dolan, also, didn't we discuss they're not making them sit in the room? They're providing.
It actually depends on their age.
It depends on.
For the high school, though, right?
Yes, good point. I can say that, yeah.
Okay.
Then I just ask you to, respectfully ask you to put a policy, a clear-cut, communicated policy in place as to what you're going to do with the children that are refused whose parents refuse them from the test. That is all we're asking.
So I don't know how you do a policy that's against state regulations. I know people have done it. I understand that. We also, they did. They did. There are attorneys suggesting that shouldn't have been the case, but there are. You're absolutely right. There are a number of districts who did it, and your number, I believe, is absolutely correct also.
136.
Yeah, exactly. It was reviewed by the policy committee of this board, and it was determined that we should not do that. I would also argue that we really do try to work with students of every age level. There's a difference, and not only age level, even individual students. So I would argue that one answer for any student, whether they're in 3rd grade or 11th grade, as to what they should do, as a former teacher, I don't think there should be one answer. So great if some people came up with policies that say, you're absolutely in the room, you're absolutely out of the room. I don't think that takes into account the kids, and that's what we're doing. That's what each of our administrators is working on. It's a different story in the high school. In the high school, with trying to limit the number of days, as was referenced, in order to do that, we don't have alternate spaces or alternate people because we have instruction going on and we have assessment going on. We don't have extra places. You know, I mean, and that's a different situation than other schools. So for the parents who have this concern, and we do have letters, and I was just keeping track of them today to make sure we have everything organized, the principals are in communication with those parents, and that's how it will be dealt with. And then the rest of our focus is on those students who are going to be taking the test.
Do you understand that when a principal communicates to the parent that the parent does not have the right to refuse the test for their child, what impression that leaves on the parent? Because that's what's happening now. And other principals are telling parents that it's perfectly fine. It's a mixed message and it's a problem.
So I
don't know what's happening with
I can
my
certainly
child.
talk to you at the end of the meeting.
That's fine, but I'm just telling you in general that that's why you have 15, 20 parents who are flipping out and who are coming to this meeting who are angry.
And I would think it would also be confusing, and then I'm sorry, I'll take a breath. I would think it would also be confusing because you do have those other districts that are doing these policies. I understand that. That would be confusing. However, this board looked at it, and this board also listened to, suggestions from attorneys. How can you write a policy in opposition to what the state says is required? But I get it. Other districts did something else, and that could be confusing.
A little communication would have gone a long way.
Okay, well, we did attempt, but we can always do better with that.
Anyone else?
Hi, Anastasia Harrison, 1011 Minnesink Way. I come here tonight, I'm going to reiterate everything, right, to request a humane refusal policy that's crystal clear for families. I've broken it down to 5 really simple bullet points for all of the board members who might be confused and overwhelmed by all of the information. Excused absences for non-testing students avoiding the test. Simple. Alternative education environment where it is available. Simple. High school, it's already done. Middle school, already done. Consideration of individual student needs with IEPs, etc. And that is what Dr. Dolan was talking about with special children and individual needs. Alternative pen and paper testing where necessary for other students or other parents who have very concerns about kids taking tests on computers. I'm not against kids taking tests on computers. They need to get into that wave. That's where it's going. We're good with that. Assessments of students' portfolio for curriculum advancement and placement. I'm not asking you to say, I'm not going to let you do what the state says you can't. I'm not asking you to drive 45 down to 25. I'm also not asking you to jump off a bridge. All I'm asking for is 5 simple points on how to handle the families who are refusing. And I have a mixed bag. I have 3 children, and I'm doing something different with each of them. And that's been a decent experience so far. But I have other friends who are not having the same experience. And I think that if you put together a memo, a policy, something in writing that clearly states an option for people that are refusing, that is black and white with a little bit of gray for you to make different decisions, you will not have as many discrepancies and problems that you're having now. I found an excerpt from the National Education Policy Center, and I thought it was something really relevant to today's discussion. Sort of something just to chew on other than arguing. Today's 21-year-olds were in 3rd grade in 2002, when there was the No Child Left Behind Act became law. The federal government entrusted the educations to an unproven but ambitious belief that if we test children and hold educators responsible for improving test scores, we would have almost everyone scoring as proficient by 2014. Thus, we would achieve equality. This approach has not worked. The broad consensus among research is that the system is, at best, ineffective and at worst counterproductive. The issue now being debated in Washington largely ignore these facts about the failure of test-based education reform, and the proposals now on the table simply glide rather than transform the strategy with little to no promise. The test is the fuel that is fighting the Common Core. Common Core is the real problem, but we as parents don't have the guns to fight Common Core other than when we go down to Trenton. And we're doing that as a team. We are doing that. But the test is the only individual stand as a parent I can make. It's the only thing I can do where I am not standing on a street corner like a crazy woman with, don't let your kids take the park test. It's not the test. It's the fact that the state is telling me I don't have a choice. My children don't have a choice. Would you like your children to not have a choice? That's what this conversation is about. This isn't about the state. This isn't about what I want or what they want or what somebody else wants. It's about clear, decisive ideas and respect. Thank you.
Peggy, are you allowed to address the paper pencil and the accommodations for special needs? I mean, they're out there. She said there weren't any paper pencil versions or... accommodations for children with special needs.
Sure, right. I'm sorry, she was bringing up the point that there absolutely are accommodations for students with special needs, including if a child really, because of their needs, can't take it on a device.
Computer,
that they can
take a paper pencil too.
No, I know that, but there are a lot of parents who don't know that because they're not digging deep. And it would be nice to hear it from you as opposed to someone else.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
My understanding is that principals are working individually with
They are.
preparation of parents and students.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Albin. I live at 34 Sandy Hill Road. I'm the parent, a proud parent of a 2014 Westfield High School grad and a freshman in the class of 2018. And I moved to this community in 1994 with my husband in part because of what I heard was the excellence of the schools. But I see over the 4 years between the time my older daughter was a freshman and the time my daughter, who is now a freshman, the changes in education, which I'm not sure are always positive ones. My two daughters have had some of the same teachers in some of the same classes. And I've seen a disturbing trend in the teaching methods, and that's not the fault of the teachers, but it's the need to cover more and more material because of the changes in curriculum. For example, my freshman daughter, where once my older daughter would have been given an assignment in class and it would have been discussed in class, now my freshman daughter is given is sent an email on Monday told to read a chapter of a book and there will be a quiz on it on Friday. Oftentimes, almost 75% of the time or more, it's never discussed in the class. It's an attempt to move the process along to get as much of the material done. And here you're talking about 14-year-olds who perhaps haven't learned yet how to read a chapter, analyze it, be able to take a quiz, write a document-based question essay on it. And this is what's happening in education. These are 14-year-olds. I preface this because I see it as a concern, it's my concern with what I see is happening in education today, as we must do more and more with fewer resources. We're talking about the PARCC test today, and I'm here to tell you that I don't intend to refuse the test on behalf of my daughter. But I am a lawyer, and I know all about documents, and I know all about interpretations of law. And I am here to tell you that and to ask this board to pass a humane policy for those children whose parents wish to refuse the PARCC tests on behalf of their children. We've heard that there are over 135 districts that have promulgated such a policy, but Westfield, which I would like to think of as a fairly progressive district, has not. Instead, we rely on the directive as indicated by the director of our curriculum instructions and programs. Quote, for the 2014-2015 school year, oops, I lost my quote. This is the problem with technology. Here we go.
I could read it to you.
No.
On paper. I have it on paper.
Okay. Well, my technology is failing me here. For the 2014-2015 school year, the PARCC assessment will replace the prior statewide assessments, the NJ-ASC in grades 3 to 8, and HESPA in high school. As such, all students shall take the PARCC assessment as scheduled. Since the PARCC assessment is part of the state-required educational program, schools are not required to provide an alternative educational program for students who do not participate in the statewide assessment. Well, I put my lawyer brain to work on that paragraph, and I didn't like what came back to me. This is not about the value of the park tests, although I certainly have opinions about that and about the diversion of classroom and teaching resources towards the 10 days of testing in the high school. And I do want to commend Mr. Renwick and Dr. Nelson for their hard work and efforts in trying to minimize the disruption, which nonetheless we recognize will occur. But the board needs to address the reality that parents will refuse on behalf of their children, and children should not be penalized either because of what the current policy does not do. What it does do is an attempt to shift responsibility to the omnipotent state. We have to take responsibility for our children. Our children live in Westfield. It's the Westfield Board of Education's duty to promulgate a clear policy, not one that relies on a quotation from the New Jersey Department of Education that clearly doesn't answer parents' questions. Clearly, what you're hearing tonight is a lot about communication and the lack of good communication to parents. And a lot of the concerns would be mitigated if parents heard clear communication. Okay, we're not getting that, and that's why parents are concerned. Thank you.
Good evening, Liz Mulholland, 1029 Harding Street. I want to thank all of you, by the way. I just have to say, as an aside, we went to our first Westfield High School meeting where we got to go in and meet with the guidance counselors. Phenomenal program, very impressive, and I know that everybody here is doing the best that they can, which is why I feel very badly for everybody in this room, parents, superintendent, school board. I attended the meeting on Thursday, the education committee meeting. And, you know, sometimes you get tired. You're sitting in the same seat. I was there for 6 hours. So you get up and you move from room to room and, you know, wherever a seat opens up. And, of course, I've seen just as many letters as you have coming from the State Department of Education, from the School Board Association, from the attorneys for School Boards Association. And I happened to sit over in the corner, not knowing, between the Department of Education and the School Board Association. So they had their representatives there. It is an amazing thing to see. It's an amazing thing to witness because they're in their whole, they were in the entire back row of the room. And of course, what's being said by all of the legislators. I have to tell you, there was not one legislator there that wasn't horrified at the idea that a child would be punished for refusing. Every legislator there recognized that a child can refuse a test, and that there is not one educator on this earth that should punish a child for refusing a test. They were not one, and it had bipartisan support. 4165, which is the refusal, had bipartisan support. At this particular meeting, it was up for discussion only. There were 2 other bills that were for a vote. They went out of their way to note that they found it egregious that that kind of behavior would take place in any district, and that is why they brought this to the table. Oddly enough, the school board, and I hate to say this, the School Board Association and the DOE was laughing while they were speaking. Now, this is in a room full of 50 to 80 parents, many of whom had special needs students who year after year were failing the park tests, not the park tests, the standardized tests, and for years had been frustrated that their children were forced to take these tests. So the callousness with which you're sitting in a room is astounding. And I think that what you're hearing now is a lot of parents saying, enough, enough. The districts that have come up with resolutions, a lot of them were very reluctant. A lot of them sent out letters saying that they were going to punish the students, sent out letters saying they could not refuse, telling parents they couldn't refuse. And then finally, they said, you know what, we've gone to the state 1,000,000 times. Not one time have they given us a clear directive. When we've said we want a crystal clear directive, they send us documents that have links to one attorney's review of something. But they never say you absolutely must punish the student. You absolutely cannot you cannot allow them or afford them an alternative. So there is a lot of doublespeak. I don't envy your positions, and I don't envy the parents, because we recognize what's going on, and it's the children in the district that are getting harmed. It's not your district, but throughout the country. At the meeting, there was somebody came up with this giant box, 14,000 signatures from parents across the state. They had 3 bills that were discussed. 2 were passed. 1 was passed unanimously. The other one was 7-0 with an abstention. The one that was passed unanimously is, I'm not sure if you're aware, but it has been said that the intention is to bring park testing K to 2. So they want to start park testing in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. Of course, that was unanimously supported that this should not happen. The other bill that was passed with a 7-0-1 extension, also bipartisan, both of these were passed bipartisan. That was because park test has no reliability. And as any educator, and I'm sure you yourselves have known by unfortunately having to look this stuff up, you know that the validity of the test and reliability, there's nothing on that. A test can't become reliable until it has data points. Because of that, the legislators brought up a bill that says you cannot punish students, teachers, or schools for 3 years. They came up with the reason for 3 years because we're not going to get the results of this test back until minimum October, possibly November. So by the time we get those results back to the schools, then we have to figure out, well, what happened? Is it good? Is it bad? That's going to take another 6 months. So realistically, they figure 3 years is enough time to have this thing go operational. And that's what they explained at the board. So they did get bipartisan support. And the only abstention was noted was because her theory, and I don't really understand this, maybe you guys will, but she said, well, what's the point of giving a test if you can't use it? And I thought that the test was supposed to be diagnostic, but apparently no, because it was more about the high-stakes use of it. She felt if you couldn't use it for high-stakes purposes, or at least that's the way it came off, then why are we giving it? As far as the 95%, again, you're going to hear from the Department of Education something totally different than any other person. Never once has there ever been loss of funding due to lack of 95%? The state here has 7 districts that don't have 95% participation. Those districts never had a problem. Over 107 schools have less than 95 participation rate in their subgroups. They've never been penalized. So again, I don't envy you because you're trying to do what's right. Parents are trying to do what's right too. There are 134 school districts that have done this, and again, various reasons. I have all of them listed here. I'll give it to the president so he can certainly share with you guys if you want to look up their resolutions. Also, some words from the meeting and the 95% issues that we discussed. Also, bear in mind that the Congress is rewriting the ESEA laws. So obviously, that 95% is the biggest bone of contention with legislators in Washington also. So I would hate to see any kind of a division or divisiveness happen between the board, the superintendent, and the parents. And though you might not want to write something down, just to know, even if it's quietly, even if you don't want it publicly, just to know that you would treat these children, and I have no doubt you will, but they just want to know that if their child refuses it, it's not going to harm them. And I have no doubt that you will do that, but I think that that's kind of what the parents are asking for. So, and again, it's not your fault.
But I do, if you don't mind, I want to emphasize that point because that's the one thing that's been said tonight that I've been struggling with personally, because people in this room have sent, I think, a lot of good information to board members, and quite frankly, we've been thankful for the information we've gotten. It's been eye-opening in some respects, and we can agree or disagree over the test and its value and its implications. But there were comments tonight that the board and the administration are somehow providing inhumane, and there's a quote, inhumane treatment to our students, are somehow retaliating against our students, and that's tough to actually hear because I mean, do you see any evidence of that? I mean, like, is there? I get you want better communication. I bet I get things are said different ways, but inhumane treatment of our students, I'm really struggling with that.
Right, or that they would.
I mean, are you? seriously, like, do you?
You know what? I don't have personal experience whatsoever. If I was a parent, and this isn't happening to me, so all I can say, if I was a parent and I wanted to refuse the test for my child, and I was told you absolutely may not, I would feel that my rights were being infringed upon. I would feel that somebody forcing my child to do something would probably make me feel that way. I understand where you are coming from, and that's every person has their own perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
But
And
that's
thank you again
personal.
thank you again for the information, because it has been helpful, and I will circulate this.
If they attended school, they wouldn't be forced to take it, but they're not going to be punished either.
Correct, you can
Well,
say
that's,
that.
I think that's what they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, if they go to school,
Everybody wants to know.
if they go to school, they're not going to be forced to take it, and they're not going to be punished.
But you've got teachers that are begging kids to take the test in the high school. That's a problem. I think you need to know that.
that's telling people that they have to take the test.
And so I agree. I think that those are certainly points that we need to know about. And this is probably not the time and the place to publicly name those individuals. Dr. Dolan has extended herself and said, please talk to me after the meeting about that. But there has never been, I feel like we have been clear from the very beginning that nobody, then maybe it's about what our respective definitions of punishment are. Because
No, I think the problem has been that you have not clearly communicated to the population in the district what the policy is. Instead, you have just taken a quote, and what I quoted was in the letter that was sent to high school parents. You've just taken a quote, okay, and said, we're relying on this quote, okay, and that's what we're relying on.
Well, I was at that high school meeting
Let's not gaze
when
back and forth. People want to talk, they can talk from the mic. I do think that Dr. Dolan has been clear in any conversation I've heard in the boardroom that we will not force a student to take the test. I'm just saying, I hear you, and I'm glad you're bringing that thought to us, but I have clearly heard her say that.
And she has, and not only has she, but not only have I, but, and I did put that in the letter also that went out to people, but I also understand there's so much other noise, right? You hear what's happening in other districts, and you hear what the commissioner is saying and all of that. I truly can understand why parents would be confused, because there are other districts talking about discipline. I don't know what discipline I would do if a student came in and said, my mother said don't take the test, or my father said don't take a test. What discipline would a teacher do about that? I don't understand. Is that a detention? I don't think so. I think it's confusing for parents because there are other administrators saying something about the discipline, and the commissioner said the districts would do the discipline. Well, what discipline would that be? If a kid came in and said, my mother said don't take the test, not in our code of conduct. So that it's not discipline, although other people are talking about that.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the only discipline I could think of is I'm the test coordinator for my district, so I feel your pain, and I'm a teacher, so I understand. But the only discipline I could be thinking is that some districts were discussing if a student were to come in and became destructive and did typical behavior things on an ordinary day in the testing room that wouldn't be allowed any other day of school, then the code of conduct policy would be enforced.
But that's different.
That's totally different, but I think that's what's being misconfused. But the New Jersey policy itself does allow a student to have a book to read in the testing room.
After they finish the test. That's not for a student, that's confusing. It says you can't.
So.
In the room unless you're taking a test.
This is not an open conversation.
Right. So, not surprisingly, any meeting I have attended in the recent past as a superintendent, this comes up as a topic, not surprisingly. So, and there are so many things quoted as the gospel truth. This is the answer. And then you go to the person who's in charge of it for the state and they say something else. So, I was told that the assistant commissioner, I don't think that's the exact title, but that's what it is, the assistant commissioner in charge of all of this was in Cranford and spoke with the administrators in Cranford and said, absolutely, a student may use a book in the testing situation. And I would argue as an educator, You can't make one policy for that, because will that make sense for any third grader? No. A couple of third graders, maybe, but not others. A middle schooler, well, that really depends, right? For some kids, they'd be just fine sitting there and reading, and another kid would absolutely not. And the high school, it would be the same thing. So I don't think it's as easy as for the parents, and it's a small number, but for the parents where they're saying this, it's not as easy as a blanket policy. I wish it were, honestly. I do, but I don't think it is. I think just as we use our judgment and our knowledge of students when we make decisions about instruction, we're going to do the same thing with this. And just as we would respect a child in the course of an everyday, we're going to respect them when it comes to testing, and we respect the parents as well. And we will also follow what the code says and what we're required to do. We will do all of that, and we really are trying very hard to deal with all of it. We truly are, and if we've tried to communicate, we've sent out. We've had over 20 meetings. Well over 20 meetings. We've sent out letters. We have information on the website. But I understand. That doesn't mean it got to everybody. It means we have to keep on communicating, and we'll do that.
We're still in public session. You can address the board from the microphone. I was just going to say. But please don't. Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and you're welcome to have as much time as you need.
Amy Flax, 93 Fairhill Drive. Dr. Dolan, what you just said so eloquently would be so excellent if that could be communicated to the parents. It's not necessarily a policy, but we're going to handle it individually, and we will respect the parents and the children. And I think that would take care of a lot of this. I do like the fact that you don't have maybe a blanket policy, but maybe that you will look at individuals and what grade they're in and what's best for that child, or if they're at the high school and they can attend their classes. But I think what you just said now is what everybody needs to hear. And you said it so eloquently and beautifully and respectfully to parents and children. So if you could think about communicating that to the district, I think that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Ronit Horowitz, and I want to thank you so much for your service to our wonderful town. I was absolutely not expecting to speak tonight, and I'm so grateful that I was here. I am a little concerned at having just learned that you're considering cutting the 3 Northside Lincoln buses down to 1 bus. And I am one of the lucky families who received an acceptance into the Lincoln RAP program. It was so wonderful tonight to hear Mrs. Zavitz speak about the program, and I'm so excited that my daughter is going to be able to participate. As you can imagine, there were many factors that went into my decision to send my child to Lincoln, and one of which was the logistics of transportation. And when I made my decision, I was told that the Lincoln bus would return my daughter to Franklin no later than 3:30. I have 2 other children in the elementary school system, and we decided that waiting from 3:05 at the time of the departure at Franklin to 3:30, 3:35 was doable for our family. I figured we would just wait in the car during the winter months when we can't go outside to play. But if you combine them into 1 bus for all of those North Side schools, I would guess that the wait time would be considerably much longer than that. And I'm not sure then that my decision would have gone that way. And I think that's a lot of things, I think other families may feel as well. So if you could please take the consideration of the current elementary school families into your determination as far as that budgetary requirement. I know that the Lincoln program will continue to flourish and grow. Thank you so much.
May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Would you consider a fee for the bus?
I would.
Thank you.
But I already made my decision for next year, and they had already laid out the information as far as for next year.
That's fair. That's fair. Mm-hmm.
Anastasia Harrison. My oldest daughter had gone to private school, And when you go to private school, they sort of hit you over the head for absolutely everything, including, socks, and I'm not joking. But one of the things that sort of upset me a little bit was that you were going to make the activity, you're looking at making the activity fee increase. And that's upsetting because I have a child in sports, and I can tell you that $160 is just sort of the entrance fee, and then it goes up from there. I think I'm up to like $800 or $900 on the first high school sport, so prepare yourself, anybody with little kids. But one of the things that I was thinking, well, since you're so fee happy, are you allowed to add a technology fee in there for students and then give them the Wi-Fi code? Currently, kids don't have the Wi-Fi code. They're not allowed to have it. And I'm sort of thinking pay to play. You do it with sports. Maybe you could do it with technology. And then I'm not saying that I'm selfishly thinking I'll get my kids to earn the money and let them pay for it if they really want it. But just a way to possibly stop the budget from bleeding so bad. I know that a lot of parents will pay it, but maybe there's a way to balance. Because the one thing about technology that concerns me is that there's not a sustainable funding source. Because 2 years ago your technology budget was $500,000. Today it's over $2 million. It's a 400% increase in only 2 years. So if you're hoping to meet your cap 3 years from now, that's not going to happen if you don't get technology under control. And I don't know how to do that, but I just wanted to put that out there.
That's good brainstorming.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? All right, seeing no one come to the podium, I would ask the board to approve the following resolutions. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing negotiations. And further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jenny. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We'll move into private session.
Save